Chapter 274. Chu Li. Co. Tying stood up and laughed. You're finally back. Master Co. Chu Li closed fist saluted. Everyone closed fist saluted him, and Chu Li returned the greeting. It was a lively scene. The rugged young man smiled, and closed fist saluted back. Chu Li stopped and looked at him suspiciously. He then looked at Co. Tying. He, come, let me introduce you. This is the new high official who joined the public house. His name is Jing Zhixue. Co. Tying smiled. Chu Li, don't be fooled by his young age. He's already a grandmaster. Nice to meet you. Chu Li closed fist saluted and smiled. Come, take a seat. Co. Tying pushed Chu Li to the seat of honor. Chu Li declined the offer twice and finally sat down. Jing Zhixue sat at the last seat. He saw Chu Li sitting down casually. The high officials around him did not have any strange expressions. They were used to it. He was only an innate master at such a young age, and yet he was so arrogant. He did not even care about the grandmasters. Co. Tying smiled. Chu Li, did you gain a lot from your training? I can see that your entire temperament has changed. You've become more mature and reserved. I guess I had some experience. Chu Li smiled. Lin Quan called for the maids to serve the dishes and wine. They filled the cups one by one. Come, let's give a toast to Chief Chu. Training outside is a tough job. Co. Tying raised his silver cup and stood up. He chuckled and said, Chief Chu Li's safe return is a cause for celebration. This is a joyous occasion for our public house. Co. Tying usually used his third sister as his brain trust and listened to her ideas. Now that she was gone, he had no choice but to look for Chu Li. Unfortunately, Chu Li had left as well. This made him anxious and exhausted. Now that Chu Li had returned, he could finally breathe a sigh of relief. Everyone smiled and raised their cups. Chu Li smiled and downed his cup, seeing how arrogant he was even when facing Master Co. Tying. Jing Zhixue secretly sneered. He really did not know his place. No matter how much he contributed, he was still a subordinate. How could he be on the same level as Master Co. Tying? He stood up, raised his cup, and said with a smile, Chief Chu, let me give you a toast. This is my apology. Chu Li smiled at him. Oh, what crime did Consecrator Jing commit? I really didn't know that Protector Jiang was Chief Chu's friend. Jing Zhixue shook his head and sighed. I regretted it after the incident, but I was afraid that he would misunderstand if I apologized to him. Chu Li smiled. Brother Jiang is not skilled enough. Even if he was beaten, there was nothing he could say. Jing Gongfeng is new here, so it is understandable that he did not take the rules of the mansion to heart. No, of course I know the rules. Jing Zhixue quickly interrupted him and waved his hand, smiling. I was a little drunk at that time and couldn't control myself. I thought he would dodge, so I scared him and made a harmless joke. I never thought that he wouldn't be able to dodge it. It's my fault. It's my fault. Chu Li toyed with the silver cup and smiled. Oh, so it was a joke. Then I want to know, what exactly did High Official Jing say to make Brother Jiang so angry that he dared to scold you? The High Official? It's just a joke. Jing Zhixue secretly praised his sharp tongue and was angry at his arrogance. Chu Li laughed. You're talking bad about me, aren't you? Talking behind my back. You can even joke around with me in front of me. I really admire High Official Jing's shrewdness. Jing Zhixue smiled embarrassedly. I drank a little too much that day and was muddle-headed, so I said some drunken things. Chief Chu won't blame me, right? I don't mind. Chu Li kept a smile on his face. I don't blame people with my words. I still have this much tolerance. It's okay to talk bad about me, but I heard that high official Jing said something about the third lady. This is misinformation. A rumor, definitely a rumor. Jing Jishue quickly waved his hand. Seeing that Xiao Taiying's face darkened, Jing Jishue cursed in his heart. He quickly said, "It was just a casual remark. If someone heard it, they would think that I was talking bad about the third lady." "I see." Chu nodded. "Where is High Official Jing from?" "Jing Zhou." Jing Jishue let out a sigh of relief. He almost couldn't handle it. Chu Li was indeed, as the rumors said, smart and powerful. Chu Li slowly said, "Then who is your master?" "Sigh, I don't have a master. I had a fortuitous encounter. I fell into a valley and had a dream. When I woke up, I had this martial art. It's really strange," Jing Jishue said with an embarrassed but proud smile. Everyone looked at him in surprise. Xiao Taiying laughed. "Something like that happened." "I didn't believe it either," Jing Jishue said embarrassedly. "But it's like that." Chu Li smiled faintly. "Then High Official Jing didn't go to other public houses? Our public houses are weak now, and we are not favored by the grandmasters. A good bird chooses a good tree to nest in." Jing Jishue quickly said, "I think differently from others. If I go to a powerful public house, I won't have a place to use my skills. Moreover, Master Xiao Taiying has a good reputation. He is fair and upright. I admire him very much, so I came." I'm flattered." Xiao Taiying waved his hand and smiled. His gloomy face slightly recovered. "High Official Jing, did you come alone?" Chu Li smiled. "Or with friends?" "Sai, I'm alone." Jing Jishue smiled. "Of course, if I can stay, I have 3 or 4 friends too. I'll introduce them to you." "Haha, that's great." Xiao Taiying laughed. Chu Li smiled strangely. "If that's the case, then let's eat. Don't just talk. Come, let's eat." Xiao Taiying was in a good mood. He looked at Chu Li. Chu Li shook his head. Although Xiao Taiying was upright, he was not a fool. He would not easily believe a grandmaster. Letting Chu Li meet Jing Jishue was also to test him. Now that Chu Li was in charge of the Gloriesville courtyard, Xiao Taiying could only rely on him since Xiao Qi had left. Jing Jishue returned to his courtyard. He stood in the courtyard and looked at the bright moon. He could not stop breathing heavily. His cheerful face was now frighteningly ferocious. He gritted his teeth and stared at the moon. He sneered. "Laugh all you want. I'll make you cry tomorrow." Jiang Kuai was Chu Li's friend. If he injured Jiang Kuai, it would be a disgrace to Chu Li. If he apologized to Chu Li, Jiang Kuai would not be happy. Everyone would also doubt if they would be at a disadvantage if they followed him. If he did not accept it, he would leave the impression of being narrow-minded and intolerant in front of Master Xiao Taiying. He would have achieved his goal. What young hero! A rare talent. I want to teach you a lesson. He would wait for him at the martial arts hall tomorrow. As soon as he appeared, he would pull him aside. He wanted to spar with him and make him lose face. What was the use of having a high position? Without strong enough martial arts, everyone would still look down on him, secretly. If he could not convince everyone, then he would be restrained and lose Master Xiao Taiying's trust. When that time came, he would have the opportunity to rise. Thinking about this, he chuckled. He was very proud of himself. No matter how powerful a hero was, he would still be defeated by him. Xue Ling's beautiful face appeared in his mind, her graceful figure that could make one's heart beat faster. Once he defeated Chu Li, he would use his position to get this little beauty. He would play with her day and night. That would be the life of a deity. Thinking about this, the gloominess from the banquet slowly dissipated. His rough face became cheerful again. He smiled and entered the house. Chu Li did not go to the martial arts hall for the next few days. He stayed on his own island. If he stayed on the Jade Guardian Island, he would think of her. It would only increase his sadness. So he simply moved to his own island. All the spirit trees and spirit herbs in the Gloriesville courtyard were moved to the island with him. Song Yuning, who originally lived on the island, moved to Iron Eagle Island. They lived together. Chu Li secretly admired her courage. The next evening, Song Yuning personally cooked. Only she and Co. Taiying invited Chu Li to a banquet. Chapter 275. P.S. Another 6 chapters. These few days feel like a year has passed. I'm as tired as a dog. Give me some monthly votes as mental food. I also want recommendation votes. 10 days later, in the early morning, Chu Li finished his training and had his breakfast. Then, he went to the martial arts hall with Xue Ling. He wanted to go to the martial arts hall to check out the ancient books and see if there was any news about the heavenly demonic power. He already had the authority to browse through the ancient library. There were many rare and wondrous items, including some world-shocking records, such as how the spiritual beasts wreaked havoc throughout the world. Not even 1/10 of the human race survived, and they were almost wiped out. Xue Ling steered the boat forward. "Young master, are you really not going to look for trouble with Jing?" Chu Li stood at the bow of the ship with his hands behind his back. His white robe fluttered in the wind as he remained silent. "Is there someone stopping us?" Xue Ling tilted her head and looked at him. As far as she knew, the young master was not so magnanimous that he would just laugh it off after being slapped in the face. More than 10 days had passed, but there was still no movement. Someone must have stopped them. Is it the eldest young master? Xue Ling scoffed and curled her lips. He's thirsty for talent. He's definitely afraid that you'll mess with the Jing family. It'll be a bad influence. Chu Li said, "It's not the eldest master." "Who is that?" Xue Ling asked. Suddenly, she was surprised. "Master, you haven't met the second lady yet." There's no hurry," Chu Li said. "Why don't you see the second lady?" Xue Ling's eyes widened as she stared at him without blinking. Chu Li said snappily, "Look ahead." Xue Ling said, "Could it be that he had a falling out with the second lady?" "You're really imaginative," Chu Li said. "We're here." The boat drifted to the shore. The two of them stepped onto the training field in front of the martial arts hall and took a detour along the side of the field. Jing Zhixue, who had been waiting bitterly in the crowd for several days, had his eyes lit up. He hurriedly strode towards him and laughed from afar. "What a coincidence, Chief Chu." Chu Li stood still, and so did Xue Ling. She glared at the arrogant Jing Zhixue and cursed him in her heart. Jing Zhixue strode forward, his inner chi surging in front of him, pushing away the guards in front of him, making them furious. They all turned their heads and were about to curse. Seeing that it was him, the Grand Master, and the high official of the public house, he swallowed his vulgarities. Chu Li quietly sized him up. Xiao Qin said calmly, "Consecrator Jing, what can I do for you?" "Haha, I wouldn't dare." Jing Zhixue laughed. "I wouldn't dare to say anything in front of Chief Chu. I just want to compare notes with Chief Chu. Spar." Chu Li smiled faintly. Jing Zhixue smiled. "In my opinion, martial arts are the foundation of everything. If you do not have a strong enough martial arts, you will not be able to achieve anything. I'm afraid that his foundation isn't stable, and he won't be able to bear the heavy responsibility." What else?" Chu Li asked. People slowly gathered around him. Jing Zhixue was invigorated and smiled. "I heard that Chief Chu is highly skilled in martial arts and is known as the top youth expert. I am itching to test my skills and would like to witness the glory of the top youth expert." Everyone cursed in their hearts. Mother asterisk her. He's an innate master, and you're a grandmaster. Another exulted, sparring my ass. Chuli sized him up and smiled. You think that just because you're a grandmaster, you can become a rank 2 protector and sit in my position, right? Well, Jing Jishue hesitated for a while before shaking his head and smiling. I don't have that intention. I just want to experience Chief Chu's elegance. He understood that if he said yes, he would definitely be laughed at by the crowd for being delusional. Zhao Qingshan and the other grandmasters were all tyrannical and older than him by a lifetime, but they did not have high positions. They were just exalted. However, this Chuli really had a glib tongue. When he said that, it did not show that his martial arts was weak, but that he was talented. He did not rely on martial arts, but his intelligence to sit in such a high position. It was even more awe-inspiring. Chuli raised his voice. Elder Zhao. Yes. Zhao Qingshan stood outside the crowd and shouted. What orders do you have, Chief? Take him down. Chuli pointed at Jing Jishue. Jing Jishue was startled and laughed. Take me down? Chief Chu, don't joke around. I just want to compare notes with you. I didn't commit any serious crimes, did I? Zhao Qingshan glided over the crowd and rushed towards Jing Jishue. The people hurriedly retreated further to make way for a bigger space. Everyone's eyes were wide open, and they were elated. It was a battle between grandmasters. It was a rare sight to see. Jing Jishue shouted, Chief Chu, what is the meaning of this? Chuli looked at him without saying a word. Zhao Qingshan pressed his palm down, and with a soft whistle, a palm print appeared faintly and crashed towards Jing Jishue. Jing Jishue turned to avoid it and shouted, Chief Chu, you are taking revenge for personal reasons and abusing your power. I am a high official of the House of Haiduke. I will report to Master Xiao and punish you. Chuli calmly said, Elder Zhao. Zhao Qingshan nodded. Suddenly, his aura exploded like a ferocious beast. He rushed towards Jing Jishue violently and wanted to engage in a more dangerous close combat. Jing Jishue was still young and weaker than Zhao Qingshan. At this moment, Zhao Qingshan was giving his all. He could not spare any energy to speak and could only fight back with his fists. After a few rounds, Jing Jishue was at a disadvantage. He gritted his teeth, and in anger, he waved his fists and scolded, Chuli, you narrow-minded fellow. I only hit one of your dogs, and you are not willing to forgive me. You are taking revenge for personal reasons. What a despicable person. Despicable person. Chuli did not say a word. He only watched the fight between the two. Chuli, is this how the House of Haiduke treats their high official? From today onwards, as long as you are here, don't even think about having a grandmaster join the House of Haiduke. Chuli, don't pretend to be mute. You have nothing to say, right? Doing such despicable things. The world will laugh at you. Chuli remained silent. Hey! Zhao Qingshan took the opportunity and shouted. His palms expanded and pressed on Jing Jishue's chest. Bang! Jing Jishue flew like a stone. He spat out a mouthful of blood and used the momentum to increase his speed. He wanted to escape, but Zhao Qingshan could not catch up. Xue Ling panicked and pulled Chu Li's sleeve. Master! Jing Jishue wanted to steal the boat and escape. Bang! A shadow suddenly flew out from the lake and hit Jing Jishue lightly. Jing Jishue fell onto the martial arts field like a kite with a broken string. Blood flowed from the corner of his mouth, and his face was pale. He wanted to get up, but did not have the strength to do so. This light hit was even heavier than Zhao Qingshan's. Everyone looked at it. It was Lin Quan. Lin Quan had been following behind Master Xiao Taiying like a shadow. He was usually so humble that people could not help but overlook him. But now, with this palm strike, everyone understood that Lin Quan was actually an expert who had concealed his strength. Lin Quan came in front of Chu Li and closed fist saluted. "Chief Chu Li, I have brought the two people here." "Thank you, Elder Lin Quan." "Bring them here," Chu Li said. "We have to convince Brother Jing." "Yes," Lin Quan replied with a smile. He floated onto the boat and took out two people. One was young, and the other was middle-aged. The two people were thrown in front of Jing Zhixue. Their acupuncture points were sealed, and they could not move. Chu Li paced with his hands behind his back. He looked at Jing Zhixue, who was lying on the ground and staring at him. "Brother Jing, do you really think you can sneak into the house of High Duke?" "Chu Li, you are trying to frame me." Jing Zhixue said fiercely, "I will get justice from Master Xiao Taiying." Chapter 276. Chu Li took out a dossier from his sleeve and opened it. Lu Dongchu, a native of Yushan, Green Hill Road. He has been a disciple of Feng Huang Mountain since he was young and stepped into the Grand Master's boundary a year ago. He put away the dossier. "Lu Dongchu, am I right?" Jing Zhixue's face darkened. He did not expect Chu Li to find out his background so quickly. Logically speaking, he was a secret master even in Feng Huang Mountain. Outsiders did not know about him, which was why he dared to enter the House of High Duke as a spy. He had really underestimated the power of the High Duke's public house. They were everywhere, and it was impossible to guard against them. "Lu Dongchu, are you working for the Ren public house?" Chu Li asked. "Ha ha." Lu Dongchu laughed heartily and said in an unconcerned manner, "Now that things have come to this, what's the point of talking about it? Is it the Ren public house? Not bad. Very good." Chu Li smiled. "Elder Lin, cripple his martial arts and throw him out of the public house." "Yes," Lin Quan answered with a smile. He walked up to Lu Dongchu and slowly extended his hand. Wait. Lu Dongchu's complexion changed greatly. He hastily shouted, "Why did you cripple my martial arts?" "I'll just leave." Chu Li's face darkened, and he said coldly, "Do you think that the public house is a place where you can come and go as you please? Since you've entered the public house, you'll be restricted by the public house's rules. For someone like you who harbors ill intentions, it's already a great mercy to expel you from the public house. If it wasn't for the fact that you haven't caused a disaster yet, you'll definitely be beheaded." "Chu Li, you're vicious," Lu Dongchu scolded. "If you dare to cripple my martial arts, the Run public house will never forgive you." Chu Li said, "You're wrong. It should be Feng Huang Mountain that won't forgive me, right? I'd like to see what your Phoenix Mountain is capable of, Elder Lin." "Yes," Lin Quan replied. Without waiting for Lei Dongchu's reply, Lin Quan struck his dantian with his palm. Everyone heard a long whistling sound. Lu Dongchu was like a broken ball. He quickly became dispirited, and his essence qi and spirit dissipated. The surrounding people trembled, as if this palm had landed on their bodies. A Grand Master, an existence that could only be seen but not reached. He might not have the luck to step into the Grand Master's boundary in his lifetime. However, such a Grand Master was crippled just like that. He fell from the clouds to the mud, just like an emperor turned into a beggar. Just the thought of it was terrifying. In this world, without martial arts, one was a cripple. He was originally proud and arrogant, but now he had become a cripple. This Lu Dongchu was finished. Chu Li waved his hand. Lin Quan picked up Lei Dongchu, and Zhao Qingshan picked up the two men. They swept past the crowd and fluttered onto the small boat. Then, like an arrow shot from a bow, they left for the mansion gate and soon disappeared. Chu Li nodded at the crowd and turned around to walk towards the martial arts hall. Everyone hurriedly cupped their fists and bowed. They were secretly apprehensive and felt a chill run down their spine. Chief Chu's power was increasing day by day, even though he was a grandmaster. It was enough to make one suffocate. Just a glance from him would make one's entire body go cold. Shui followed behind Chu Li. She pursed her lips tightly to prevent herself from laughing. This was too satisfying, too satisfying. It was too impressive. The guards on the training field didn't dare to look at their young master. In the blink of an eye, the young master did not even need to lift a finger to cripple a grandmaster. Who would dare to go against the young master? Speak ill of the young master? Chu Li thoughtfully entered the martial arts hall. He directly went up to the ancient library on the 4th floor and flipped through the books one by one. He quickly finished reading and shook his head. There was no record of the heavenly demonic power. He walked back and Shui hurriedly followed. He stood at the bow of the small boat. The breeze blew and Chu Li's white robe fluttered. He thoughtfully looked in the direction of the island of Symphony. "Young master, what's wrong?" Shui was puzzled. "You should be happy that you got rid of that guy." Chu Li glanced at her and shook his head. Lei Dongchu was not a spy from the Rin public house. He was from the imperial residence of Prince N's boldness was obvious. However, this was not the truth to Master Xiao Taiying. Master Xiao Taiying always thought that Prince N liked this marriage. He felt that second sister was the first beauty of the great Ji dynasty and the second lady of the public house. She was good enough for Prince and should be happy. Xiao Qi decided to hide it from Master Xiao Taiying because she was afraid that he would be angry and do something stupid. Now that it had come to this, she could not tell Master Xiao Taiying. Since he did not discuss it with Xiao Qi, he could only keep it in his heart and not tell anyone. He was now a grandmaster. It would not be difficult to kill Prince N, but the emperor would be difficult. If Prince N died, the emperor would be furious. He might even do it himself. He could not even take a punch from High Duke Lu, let alone the emperor. An enlightened master must have some magical skills. No matter how secretive he was, he might be found out and targeted. Then his little life would be over. He wanted to kill Prince N, but he was afraid of hurting him. He had been thinking of a solution. Suddenly, a small boat came from afar. A slender lady was standing on the boat. It was Yang Su, the maid sent by Prince and Chief Chu. Chief Chu. Yang Su called from afar. Chu Li controlled the small boat and shot towards her like an arrow. "Miss Lu." Yang Su was wearing a floral green gown. She curtsied. "Chief Chu, the lady wants to see you." "Okay." Chu Li nodded. Shui pursed her lips and smiled. "Master, do I have to go too?" "You go back first," Chu Li said and landed beside Yang Su. Yang Su smiled. "I heard that Chief Chu is at the martial arts hall. I was about to go there, but I didn't expect to meet you here." Chu Li asked, "Is there anything the lady wants?" He controlled the small boat. Yang Su did not need to paddle. The speed was fast, and Shui was soon left behind. Yang Su shook her head. "The lady seems to have something on her mind." Chu Li nodded. "How is Zhu Quan?" Yang Su pursed her lips and smiled. "He's turning into a wild child. He's crazy from playing." "That's good." Chu Li nodded. "There's no rush for him to practice martial arts. He needs to build his foundation, and he'll be successful in the future." Yang Su beamed with joy. Chu Li looked at her. "Does the lady like to be alone?" "She likes to let me be by her side." Yang Su smiled. Chu Li said, "She has suffered since she was young. It's inevitable that her personality would be a little weird." "The lady is kind." "I understand," Yang Su said. She entered the palace at the age of 12. She had seen many concubines that were difficult to serve. That was why she was able to serve Xiao Shi. Normal maids would not be able to do it. Chu Li sighed. If that's the case, you can always follow the lady. Yes, Yang Su smiled and nodded. Chu Li sighed. The lady is also a pitiful person. Yang Su smiled and nodded. The small boat docked. The sound of the goujing could be heard from afar. The blue sea and the clear sky. Chu Li could tell that she was in a good mood. Chu Li came to the pagoda in the sea of flowers. Xiao Shi's back was facing him. She was focused on playing the goujing. Looking at her beautiful back, Chu Li sighed. God was not fair. He put all the beauty on her. There was not a part of her that was not beautiful. Every move, every smile, every frown, there was not one that was not moving. Chu Li came to the pagoda and sat opposite her. Xiao Shi glanced at him and continued to look down. She was focused on the goujing. Chu Li closed his eyes and listened to the sound of the goujing. A gust of wind blew. Thousands of flowers swayed in the wind. The fragrance floated and lingered in the pagoda. Zhang! The sound of the goujing stopped. Xiao Shi looked up and stared at him with her clear eyes. She scoffed. If I didn't invite you, you wouldn't have come, would you? Chapter 277. Xiao Shi waved her hand. Yang Su bowed and left. There were only the two of them in the pagoda. Chu Li remained silent. Seeing Xiao Shi reminded him of Xiao Qi, and his heart dimmed. Xiao Shi's clear eyes scanned his face and asked, "How is little sister?" Chu Li looked up at her. Xiao Shi scoffed. "I don't have to guess. I know you want to see little sister." Chu Li smiled. "Yes, I went to Snow Lunar Pavilion." "Is little sister used to living there?" "Everything is fine." "That's good." Xiao Shi smiled. Her radiance overshadowed the sea of flowers outside. "Little sister is not as picky as me. She's free and has her own world. She's used to going anywhere." "Why did Lady Xiao Shi summon me?" Chu Li changed the topic. Xiao Shi stared at him. "Is Princeton going to kill me?" Chu Li was stunned. Xiao Shi said, "You're not lying to me, are you?" Chu Li pondered for a moment and sighed, "Yes." "Why?" Xiao Shi's face darkened. She thought marrying into the imperial residence would help the public house hold on for a while longer. Her eldest brother was not cut out to be a high duke, and she and little sister were both girls. Her youngest brother was nowhere to be found and only focused on martial arts. It would be good if he did not help. After thinking about it, she had no other choice if she wanted the public house to survive. She did not expect Prince and to want to kill her. "The throne," Chu Li said. Xiao Shi's face changed. "He wants to fight for the throne?" When the emperor and father were engaged, it cut off the possibility of Prince and continuing the throne, and he still did not give up. The emperor was an enlightened master, and his lifespan was unknown. Princeton dared to go against the emperor. It was hard to imagine. Chu Li said, "Who doesn't want to fight for it?" Not only did the throne mean supreme power, but it also meant an enlightened master. Every emperor of the great Ji dynasty was an enlightened master. As long as one ascended to the throne, he would definitely become an enlightened master and obtain a long life. Who could resist the temptation of such a throne? Even if the emperor confirmed the position of crown prince, the other princes would not be satisfied and would fight for it. Xiao Shi frowned and did not say a word. She stood up and held the railing as she looked into the distance. The gentle breeze ruffled her misty hair. After a while, she turned to look at Chu Li and smiled faintly. "Looks like I won't be able to escape death." Chu Li said either he faked his death, or he died for real, or he died. Xiao Shi's eyes widened. No matter how much she hated and resented King, the thought of killing King and never crossed her mind. Chu Li was so daring. Chu Li said, "If he doesn't die, your fake death will become a real death. The High Duke's public house will be finished." Seo Shi's body was weak and sickly, so she could not practice martial arts. She spent most of her time reading and playing the zither. She had read many history books, so she was very familiar with these methods. She knew that Chu Li was not exaggerating. Since King An had the intention to fight for the throne, he and the House of High Dukes had become obstacles to his succession. He must get rid of them as soon as possible. Seo Shi sighed. Whoever killed Prince An will have to die. Moreover, the emperor is enraged. It's not just one or two people who will die. It might even be thousands of people who will be buried with him. Don't you dare mess around. Chu Li frowned and remained silent. He was also worried about this. It was easy to kill King An, but the consequences were unpredictable. Seo Shi said, even with the iron coupon, it's hard to escape the disaster of the House of High Dukes. I'm a dead man, so what's the harm in dying again? Seo Shi smiled. She had seen through life and death, and was tired of it. The sooner she died, the sooner she could be free. Even if Lady Seo Shi dies, King An will not let the House of High Dukes go, Chu Li said, forcing the second lady of the House of High Dukes to death. How could the House of High Dukes not be resentful? At the crucial moment, things might go awry. He could only strike first and get rid of the public house. With King An's temperament, he would definitely do something like this. Seo Shi's jade-like face tightened. Her expression changed. After a while, she sighed and shook her head. She could not think of a solution. Chu Li said, Lady Seo Shi, I plan to do it in 2 steps. Seo Shi looked at him lazily. The first step is to marry into the imperial residence of King An. The second step is to kill King An. Once King An is dead, Lady Seo Shi will become the owner of the imperial residence. Not only can you protect yourself, but you can also support the House of High Dukes. Uffed. Seo Shi laughed out loud. You're really daydreaming. It might not be impossible. Chu Li said, it's the only way. Let's not talk about the first step. Let's talk about the second step. If you kill King An, the emperor will kill you. Can you escape from the emperor's pursuit? Chu Li said, think of a way to shift the blame to someone else. The emperor is an enlightened master. There's no way to hide it. What kind of abilities does an enlightened master have? God knows, Seo Shi said. All the truth in the world has nowhere to hide. It's clear, so there's no way to hide it from him. Chu Li stood up and started pacing. Seo Shi's bright eyes stared at him. Is there any way to avoid the emperor's pursuit? Chu Li said, the world is big. The emperor can't just kill whoever he wants, right? Then we can only go to the Tempest Temple. Seo Shi said, the Tempest Temple also has an enlightened master, so the emperor won't go there. If they fight, the great Ji dynasty will be finished. Chu Li understood after thinking about it. There were high and low enlightened masters. There would always be winners and losers. If the emperor was defeated and died, there would be no one in the court to suppress the martial arts world. In an instant, the world would be in chaos, and the dynasty would change. For King An, the emperor would not dare to take this risk. What else besides the Tempest Temple? Then we can only go to other countries. The Li dynasty, the Fu dynasty, the Qiu dynasty, and the Zheng dynasty. These 4 countries are not weaker than the great Ji dynasty. They all have enlightened masters. The emperor won't dare to go there. Chu Li nodded thoughtfully. If the masters from other countries kill King and escape, the emperor won't be able to do anything, right? Then there's nothing we can do. At most, we can take revenge. Seo Shi said, but the masters from other countries can't enter the fairies' capital. Chu Li nodded to continue. Seo Shi said, grandmasters are like cranes among chickens. They can't be hidden. Any grandmasters who enter the fairies' capital are being watched. The masters from other countries are being watched. Chu Li nodded slowly. He had a vague outline in his mind. He had to go back and think about it before marrying into the imperial residence of King, and there's still a hurdle to overcome. Chuli said, "The Ren public house will never let you marry into the imperial residence. They will snatch you away." If the Ren public house snatched Seo Shur away, they would definitely disguise her as a thief and ruin her reputation. Then she would not be able to marry into the imperial residence of King, and Lu Yurong and King and might have an affair early on. King An's injury was caused by Lu Yurong, so she might not be afraid of King and the Ren public house. Seo Shur scoffed. The Ren public house's strength was far superior. If they really wanted to snatch her away, they would not be able to stop them. They could only win by surprise, sneak away, and hide from the Ren public house. I'm preparing to bring the lady to the fairy's capital first, and on the day of the wedding, we'll meet up with the Ren public house in the fairy's capital. Chuli said, "Will that work?" Seo Shur frowned. "Let's try it first." Chuli said, "We'll leave in 2 days." Chapter 278. By the way, have you heard of the heavenly demon? Heavenly demon? Seo Shur muttered. The heavenly demon of the 33 heavens. Chuli nodded. It was just a casual question, but he didn't expect her to really know about it. Xiao Shur said, "The heavenly demons reside above the 33 heavens. They have no form, but they have substance. They can change their appearance at will. They are ever-changing and can do whatever they want." Where's the heavenly demonic power? Heavenly demonic power. How did you hear about this? Xiao Shur asked. Chuli said, "I heard it from someone else and felt that the name was ominous, so I remembered it. The heavenly demon power was passed down from the heavenly demon scripture. It was said that it was passed down from the 33 heavens, but unfortunately it has been lost." Seo Shur shook her head and said regretfully, "Once the heavenly demon scripture is cultivated, it is said that one can transform into a myriad of forms and can even transform into a spirit beast. It is truly a supreme lost art." Then why was it lost? It's too difficult to get started. With the weakening of human innate spiritual chi, no one could master it. Over time, the heavenly demon scripture disappeared. Seo Shur sighed. The scripture of the sky demon has many similar situations. Many ancient martial arts were lost because of this. Weak, natural spiritual energy? Yes, I've read a hidden treasure before. It was said that because the spiritual beasts had left, humans became at ease, and it was hard to stimulate their potential. Every generation was weaker than the previous one. Not only can the spiritual beasts kill and eat humans, they can also bring benefits to humans. Now that the spiritual beasts have entered 100,000 Mountain, humans are no longer in danger, and they are getting weaker. Seo Shur shook her head and said, "I think it makes sense." Chuli was deep in thought. Seo Shur had read a lot of books. She was better than him. Just the name, Heavenly Demon Scripture, sounds inappropriate. There will be repercussions if I cultivate it, right? I've never heard of any repercussions. Seo Shur thought for a while. Of course it won't be completely unaffected. If you can change, how can your temperament not change? Why, do you want to practice the heavenly demon scripture? Can you find the sky demon scripture? If I cultivate this and kill King, and will the emperor be able to find me? This. Xiao Shur furrowed her brows in deep thought. She thought for a while, then shook her head and said, "I really can't say for sure. The heavenly demon scripture came from the 33 heavens. It was said that after mastering it, one would be able to sense the heavenly demon of the 33 heavens. It should be able to block the emperor's Dongzhu. Unfortunately, I can't find the heavenly demon scripture." Chuli perked up and smiled. "I'll send someone to look for it. There might be some clues." Seo Shur smiled and did not think much of it. The heavenly demon scripture was not something that could be easily found. Otherwise, the High Duke's public house would not be so weak. Chu Li Fist saluted and left. He went straight to Jiang Kuai's courtyard. Jiang Kuai was cultivating in the courtyard. Su Yuding was embroidering in the gazebo, occasionally looking up. Chu Li knocked on the door. Jiang Kuai came over and opened the door. He smiled and invited him into the pagoda. Su Yuding served tea and left. "Brother Chu, isn't that too cruel?" Jiang Kuai laughed. "Just cripple his martial arts and throw him out. He's done for." Chu Li smiled. "If he's not a mole, I'll just teach him a lesson to vent my anger." "Brother Chu, your thunderous methods have frightened many people." Jiang Kuai shook his head and smiled. A grandmaster was not an innate master. There were only so many of them in the Ji dynasty, and they could be crippled just like that. It was indeed shocking. The entire public house had been baptized. Chu Li said, "Brother Jiang, I have a favor to ask of you." "Speak," Jiang Kuai said. "Set off now. Go to the Immortals' capital and buy 3 houses. Make sure they're all connected." "How big are they?" "The size doesn't matter. It's best to find a quiet place that won't attract attention." "I understand." Jiang Kuai nodded slowly. It was obvious that it was for hiding. He was the best at hiding and knew what to buy. "Other than the Immortals' capital, buy 3 houses in Qingyun town. Buy 3 houses in Golden Light town, too." "Okay. Change your appearance and go quietly." Chu Li said, "I'll move in soon. In the future, Brother Jiang will be the one to deliver the news about me and the public house." "No problem." Jiang Kuai nodded. His biggest advantage was his light body technique and bone shrinking skill. He could change his appearance and was extremely fast. Others would not be able to recognize him. Chu Li closed fist saluted and smiled. "Once you're back, I'll set off." "Okay." Jiang Kuai nodded. Chu Li chatted with him for a while. He got up and left. He went to a small courtyard not far away. Zhuo Feiyang sat in the pagoda in the courtyard. He looked at the sky. His heart was gloomy. As soon as he heard the public house's call, he was excited and rushed back without stopping. After he returned, he found out that the person who called him back was his old enemy, his old rival, Chu Li. Chu Li was now a rank 2 scribe, the chief of Glory'sville courtyard, and an internal spy. It was the most important department in the public house, and directly reported to Master Xiao Taiying. It was a high position and power. Looking at Zhuo Feiyang, he was sent to a foreign land and was a rank 5 protector. The difference was like heaven and earth. All of this made him feel extremely disappointed and angry. How did Chu Li climb to such a high position? It was because he hugged the third lady's thigh. It was purely a trick, not a gentleman's action. He arrived at the public house yesterday without alerting anyone and did not go to the martial arts hall. He offended everyone at the martial arts hall. If he went there, he would definitely be ridiculed. Fortunately, Bai Jijia was still loyal to him. When he heard that Chu Li appeared at the martial arts hall, Bai Jijia rushed over to inform him. He witnessed the scene of Chu Li's power. After returning from the martial arts hall, he had been thinking, if he was Lu Dongchu or Jing Zhixue, could he resist? Was there a way? The result made him depressed and angry. He did not even have the strength to fight back. Knock, knock. There was a knock on the door. He went to open the door and saw Chu Li standing outside. "It's you." Zhuo Feiyang's face darkened. Chu Li looked at him. He was dressed in a sapphire blue robe. His face was as smooth as jade. He was still handsome and charming. His cultivation level was also profound. He was indeed a genius in martial arts. "What are you doing here?" Zhuo Feiyang scoffed. Chu Li walked in. Zhuo Feiyang blocked him with his body. He did not move. You are not welcome here. Chu Li stopped and smiled. You still don't learn from your mistakes. It's all because of you. You only know how to play tricks. Shuo Feiyang scoffed. Chu Li said, Shuo Feiyang, you have been recruited by the Glories Will courtyard. Do you accept the call? What do you mean? Shuo Feiyang frowned. I am a protector of the public house, not your scribe. Why should I listen to you? Chu Li said, if you don't accept the call, then go back to where you came from. From now on, you will not have the chance to return to the public house. Shuo Feiyang said coldly, what do you mean? Chu Li shrugged. You understand. Shuo Feiyang's face darkened as he glared at him. Of course, he understood what Chu Li meant. If he did not enter the Glories Will courtyard, then he could only stay in a remote place and would never have the chance to return. As long as Chu Li was in power, he would never be able to make a name for himself. Chu Li was rank 2, the highest rank in the public house, and he was still so young. His life was over. Shuo Feiyang gritted his teeth. If I were to enter the Glories Will courtyard, you would definitely take revenge on me. Chu Li laughed. Why would I want to take revenge on you? I've already taken my revenge, and it's time to make use of you. You should know how I treat my own people. Do you want me to find out who the traitor is? Shuo Feiyang scoffed. Chu Li was cunning, but he was very kind to his own people, especially the previous scene, which was said to be to help Jiang Kuai vent his anger. Go and be the spy. Be a spy? Shuo Feiyang furrowed his brows and shook his head. No way. No way. Shuo Feiyang, you should know that riches come from danger. Chu Li said, this is your chance to make a comeback. Are you really not going to do it? If I were to perform a meritorious deed, what would I get? Shuo Feiyang hesitated and scoffed. Return to the public house. Enter the Glories Will courtyard and take charge of a 10-man team. Chu Li said. Shuo Feiyang hesitated. Chu Li walked forward, and Shuo Feiyang stepped back to make way. He entered the pagoda and sat down. When Bai Jijie saw him, his eyes widened and his expression changed. Chu Li glanced at Bai Jijie and smiled. Senior Bai, it's rare to see you stay by my side. Senior Bai, are you going to enter the Glories Will courtyard? Bai Jijie looked at Shuo Feiyang hesitantly. Chapter 279. Chu Li clapped his hands and smiled. All right, from now on, we'll write off all our grudges. As for how much you can contribute, it'll all depend on your abilities. Where should I go to be a spy? Shuo Feiyang asked. Don't tell me it's the Rin public house. Chu Li shook his head. To the imperial residence of King Jing. King Jing's imperial residence. Shuo Feiyang was taken aback. Why is it King Jing's imperial residence? Chu Li said, King Jing has a reputation for being virtuous. He's been recruiting famous scholars from all over the world. You should seek refuge with him. With your abilities, you'll be put in an important position. Of course. Shuo Feiyang scoffed. He was very clear about his own talent. Other than this guy in front of him, he had never met anyone who could stand shoulder to shoulder with him. Chu Li said, as a spy, you're different from other spies. You don't have to do anything, and you don't have to pass messages. Shuo Feiyang stared at him. Chu Li said, your task isn't to keep an eye on King Jing. Don't worry about what King Jing does. What you need to do is to find out the background of everyone in King Jing's imperial residence. Find out their background. Actually, it's just making more friends. Chu Li said, treat people to drinks and make more friends when you're free. Don't purposely ask around. After a few drinks, you'll be able to understand their hobbies and weaknesses. What's the point? Everyone has a weakness. Chu Li said, you don't have to worry about the rest. That's why you don't have to be afraid of being exposed. You don't have to care about any news related to King Jing. Even if King Jing wants to harm me, you don't have to worry about it. Don't try to act smart and spread the news. I see. Zhuo Feiyang smiled. Chu Li smiled. Does this suit your taste? It's too much for you to take the risk to inform me. Zhuo Feiyang scoffed. Since I've accepted the mission, of course I'll do my best. Don't you dare harm me. Chu Li said, other people will meet you, but we won't. This is to ensure that nothing goes wrong. That's a good arrangement. Zhuo Feiyang said, I trust you to handle things. His tricks were used on his opponents. As someone who was on his side, it was indeed less troublesome. Chu Li said, I'll depart today. Junior sister Zhao? Chu Li's face darkened. He scoffed. You should understand what Sister Zhao means. Don't bother her. Zhuo Feiyang glared at him, refusing to back down. I will not give up. Chu Li shook his head and waved his hand. You're asking for death. You're brainless. He turned around and left the courtyard. Bai Jijie hurriedly said, Gongzi? Zhuo Feiyang scoffed. That Chu Li. Should we? Bai Jijie asked hesitantly. He won't frame you, right? Zhuo Feiyang said. If he wanted to set me up, there was no need for him to call me back. He was naturally impulsive. However, he wasn't an idiot. He just couldn't control his temper. With Chu Li's current power and influence, if he wanted to deal with him, he only needed to say the word, and someone would do it for him. There was no need for him to go through so much trouble. He was a martial arts genius, so he would naturally be of great use to him. Even he had to be thick-skinned enough to beg him. As long as he made enough contributions and cultivated to the Grandmaster's boundary, he would be able to surpass Chu Li's status. At that time, he would settle the score with him. Snatch junior sister Zhao back. 5 days later, in the middle of the night, Chu Li, Xiao Shi, and Yang Su silently left the public house. Chu Li held each of their wrists and flew out of the city wall under the moonlight. Xiao Shi turned her head and looked at Chongming Town. Under the moonlight, Chongming Town was mysterious and strict. It was familiar yet strange. It was intimate yet reluctant. Melancholy filled her heart. She knew that once they parted, she would never be able to return. She would leave this town forever. Chu Li floated up a tree and stood on the treetop. He turned around and looked back. Lady, you don't have to do this. When you want to come back, I will bring you back, Chu Li said. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes at him. Once I enter the imperial residence, how can I come back whenever I want? Chu Li said, I can just sneak back. Xiao Shi sighed. I hope so. Let's go. Chu Li stepped on the treetop and flew away. He carried the two ladies under the moonlight as if he was riding the wind. His white robe fluttered as if he was a deity. Yang Su laughed and said, Zongguan, why should I come along? I'm a burden. Chu Li said, I can't serve the second lady well. You'll have to do it. Xiao Shi glanced at him. You think I'm troublesome, don't you? Chu Li smiled. I'm clumsy. I'm afraid that the second lady will be wronged. Second lady also thinks that Miss Yang should follow. Humph, that's right. Xiao Shi glared at him. The maids in the imperial residence were all clumsy. Their minds were not agile. They would only move when he pointed at them. It was tiring and annoying. Yang Su was different. It was as if she knew what he was thinking. She would do everything in advance and do everything before he ordered. Moreover, the two of them had a tacit understanding. She would know what to do with just a look from him. It saved him a lot of effort. Where are we going? Yang Su smiled. Chu Li said, Qingyun Town. It's very close to Fairy's capital. Yang Su said. Qingyun Town was only 100 miles away from Fairy's capital. They would arrive in less than a day on horseback. That's the safest place. The Ren public house probably won't expect us to be there. Chu Li said. Chu Li did not delay their journey. As he spoke, he brought the two ladies over mountains and crossed rivers. They purposely went to places where there were no people. They could often see sceneries that normal people could not see. Xiao Shi looked down at the scenery under her feet. She was mesmerized. Since she was born, she was mostly trapped in the public house. She rarely left the public house. Although she had seen the scenery outside, she had never seen such magnificent scenery. The sun was setting. The sky was red. Heaven and earth were magnificent. They stopped at the peak of a mountain. They looked down at the mountains and the villa below. What's going on over there? Xiao Shi suddenly pointed at a village at the foot of the mountain. White smoke rose from the village. There were fires everywhere. Chu Li frowned. Wait for me here. I'll be back soon. There are bandits, right? Xiao Shi asked. Chu Li nodded with a sullen face. His omniscient mirror had already seen that a group of bandits were wreaking havoc in a mountain village. The people in the village hid, closed their doors and windows. These bandits knew martial arts. Closing the door was useless. They just jumped over the wall and barged in. They killed anyone they saw and robbed anything valuable. When he saw it, there were already more than 10 dead people in the village. As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly disappeared. In 2 flashes, he appeared in the small mountain village. Under the cover of the omniscient mirror, he could clearly see every person and every place in the village. If there was a life-threatening situation, he would appear in a flash and kill the bandit with one palm. There were a total of 20 bandits in the village. In the blink of an eye, he killed 18 of them. The remaining 2 were watching the horses. He did not wait for the frightened villagers to come out. He went to the 2 old men. These 2 old men looked no different from the villagers. However, their eyes were sharp and slippery. They shrunk their bodies and knelt on the ground. They kowtowed and begged for mercy. Chu Li asked where the stronghold was, how many people there were, and if there were any masters. Without waiting for the 2 old men to answer, he killed them with one palm. He floated away and reappeared in front of the 2 ladies. Xiao Shi asked, "Did you save them?" "Yes, this group of bandits came from a stockade on the mountain. Now that this group of people has died, they'll definitely come back for revenge. We have to eliminate them completely," Chu Li said. "You guys wait here, I'll be back soon." Chapter 280. Chu Li frowned. "What's there to look at?" Xiao Shi said, "I want to see what those bandits are like. They're so inhumane." Chu Li said, "They're like normal people. All right, I'll be back soon." As soon as he finished, he disappeared without a trace. Xiao Shi stomped her feet angrily. Yang Su smiled. "My lady, Chief is doing this for our own good. We really shouldn't look at murder. You've seen murder before. I've seen it once. I still feel uncomfortable when I think about it. I had nightmares for a long time. What's so scary about death? Everyone has to die." Yang Su said, "It's better not to look." "He can look, but we can't." Xiao Shi was unconvinced. "Does he have more guts than us? He's a man after all. His young energy is strong." Yang Su said, "It's best for women not to look at these." As the 2 of them spoke, Chu Li appeared in front of a village. This was a ruined village. There was a big hole in the village gate that could fit a person. The protector at the gate was dozing off with a long blade. Under the twilight, smoke curled up from the chimneys of the village. The people in the village were cooking. The village below did not cook, but there were fireworks. As he thought about this, the murderous intent in his heart grew. He floated and arrived in front of the protector. With a flash of his sword, he pierced through the heart and died instantly. Although the sword form of the first form of godly blade was not perfect, its power was still shocking. He floated into the village. The children who were playing and chasing each other in the stockade saw him and immediately screamed and ran back to where they came from. Li did not care about the children. He looked at the bandits who rushed out with swords and knives. Seeing their murderous intent, his face darkened. He rushed in front of them and flashed his sword. Every time it flashed, a heart was pierced. After a while, there were more than 10 men lying on the ground. Only a dozen children and some old and weak women and children were left. They stared at him in shock. Li scanned through the omniscient mirror, and his body flashed. He found a few that escaped and killed them one by one. Then he floated away. Behind him, there were earth-shattering cries and the women's shouts of abuse. Li showed no mercy and did not slow down. He appeared in front of the two women. Xiaoshi stared at him. She found it strange that Li had a relaxed smile on his face. It was as if he was not going to kill, but to save someone. Yang Su was also sizing him up. Li smiled. Let's go. Exterminating a stronghold full of bandits and saving a lot of innocent people, it could be said to be a meritorious deed, worthy of celebration. So he was in a very good mood. As for the dead bandits, he didn't even see them as human beings. He treated them like pigs and dogs. The three of them arrived at Qingyun City one night. Li found the three residences according to the address. Xiaoshi sized up the small courtyard. He turned to look at Li with a puzzled expression. There was no garden, no bamboo forest, and no gazebo in this small courtyard. There was only a well in the empty courtyard. From the courtyard door to the living room, there was a small path laid out with a few stones. When it rained, one could use it as a foothold to avoid sinking into the mud. This was the poorest household, which was completely different from what Xiaoshi had imagined. The surrounding houses were the same. It was obvious that the people living here were poor. Li nodded in satisfaction. Although the house was dilapidated, its location was very good. The three residences were next to the city wall. They could leave the city at any time. Is it really here? Yang Su smiled. Chief, isn't this too hard? Li said, it's surprising. It won't attract attention. But Lady Xiao sure doesn't fit in here. Yang Su said, even if Xiao sure went out with her face covered, with her graceful figure and graceful temperament, she would stand out. No one would not stare at her. Then don't go out. We won't be staying for long. That's it. Xiaoshi smiled. It's not bad. I've never lived in such a broken place. Yang Su sighed. I'm just afraid that Lady Xiaoshi won't be used to it. It's not like we can stay for a few days. Go in and tidy up. Xiaoshi said. I'm tired too. Yes. Yang Su helplessly agreed and went into the house. Li said, you guys stay here, I'll stay there. He pointed at the courtyard in the east. You're not staying with us. Xiaoshi was surprised. Li said, staying with us will damage your reputation. Rest early. If you need anything, I'll buy it tomorrow. Try not to go out. Okay. Xiaoshi stared at him and nodded lightly. Li glided over the wall and entered the courtyard in the east. Although the courtyard was broken, the bedding in the house was new. Jiang Kuai was considerate. He sat on the pit, crossed his legs, and channeled. The night passed quickly. The next morning, he finished his cultivation and went to the courtyard in the west. Xiaoshi was pacing in the courtyard. It was a way to keep fit. As she walked, she looked at every corner in amazement. When Li saw her clothes, he could not help but laugh. She wore a rustic green floral jacket. It was a world of difference from her yesterday. If one did not look at her face, no one would think that she was the first beauty of the great Ji. Yang Su was busy cooking. She was dressed like a country maid and looked neat and tidy. You're really something. Xiaoshi yawned. Chu Li smiled. You didn't sleep well last night? Sio sure said, it's a little weird to suddenly change to a Kong bed, but it's very safe. Chu Li was relieved when he saw her like that. He glided back to his courtyard and continued to cultivate. He was ready to try cultivating the heavenly demonic power. When Yang Su finished cooking, she called him and he went to eat with her. In the following days, they settled down here. The 3 residences were located at the westernmost end of the street, close to the city wall. There was no one else around. There was a family in the east of Chu Li. There was only a middle-aged woman and her 20-year-old son. Sio Shi and Yang Su almost never left the house. Chu Li, on the other hand, had to go out for a walk every day. He would buy vegetables, meat, rice, and other miscellaneous things. Daily necessities were extremely trivial. Other than going out to buy things, he was also used to strolling around the city. He walked everywhere, explored the terrain, and listened to the gossip among the people. He knew that the son of the family in the East was a member of the association. He was a disciple of the Swan Association. In the evening, he carried a piece of braised meat and walked back while bathing in the sunset. Smoke rose from the chimneys of every house on the street. He suddenly saw a young man snatching an old lady's basket. He recognized the young man. He was the son of his neighbor, Yang Baoshu. Baoshu, there's really no need. I can carry it. The old lady protected her basket and shook her head. Auntie, I don't want to criticize you, but you're already so old. Why are you acting tough? Just tell me, and I'll do it for you. Yang Baoshu was tall and strong. He had a long face and small eyes. He was not handsome at all. There were 2 bruises on his face. It was obvious that he had fought with someone. As he spoke, he forcefully snatched the old lady's basket and carried her into a house. After a while, he came out laughing. He looked up and saw Chu Li. He smiled and greeted him. Chu Li nodded and walked away slowly with his hands behind his back. Yang Baoshu looked at Chu Li's back and scratched his head. This neighbor of his was a weirdo. He looked like a scholar. He idled around every day. If he wasn't watching people play chess, he would just stroll around. It was as if he had nothing to do all day long. He wore a white robe all day long. He was too pretentious. How could he work while wearing a white robe here? There was mud everywhere on the street. If it was raining, he would be covered in mud after taking 2 steps. He was purposely making things difficult for himself. Yang Baoshu secretly shook his head and rubbed his face. He wanted to rub away the 2 bruises on his face. He slowly walked home. Chapter 281. Mother, Mother, it really has nothing to do with me. They're the ones who hit me. Yang Baoshu screamed as he ran around the courtyard. Why did they hit you? If you didn't provoke them, why would they hit you? The middle-aged woman pointed at him angrily. Chu Li looked at the situation through the omniscient mirror. The middle-aged woman had a petite figure and a beautiful face. None of the women on the street had good looks, so she was considered outstanding. I don't know either. I really didn't provoke them. They only provoked me. Yang Baoshu said in a wronged tone. Nonsense. You're always spouting nonsense. Why would they provoke you? The middle-aged woman was even angrier now. Do they think I'm easy to bully? Yang Baoshu asked uncertainly. Nonsense, nonsense. You're tall and strong. Who thinks you're easy to bully? The middle-aged woman was furious. Mother, you're wrong. Being tall and strong is useless. The guy who bullied me was short and skinny. He beat me up like a toy. Yang Baoshu quickly said, What's the point of being tall and strong? If he bullied you, wouldn't you hit him? The middle-aged woman was even more furious now. I did, but I couldn't beat him. My martial arts is not good enough. Yang Baoshu said, helplessly. That's because you don't put in the effort to cultivate. Cultivate after eating. Don't be lazy. The middle-aged woman scoffed. Mother, other people have a master to guide them. I don't have a master, so what can I cultivate with just a secret manual? Yang Baoshu mumbled, but when he saw the middle-aged woman glaring at him, he quickly laughed. Yes, I'll cultivate after eating. I'm a natural genius. I don't need a master. The middle-aged woman was annoyed. It's your mother's fault for not being able to earn money. I can't help you find a master. Mother, it's okay. I'm quite good at cultivating myself. Although I was bullied by Huyu, I can bully others. Yang Baoshu quickly said. Bastard, you're bullying others. The middle-aged woman's face darkened again. Yang Baoshu quickly waved his hand. I'm just saying. Of course not. Eat. The middle-aged woman turned around and went into the house. Yang Baoshu let out a long sigh, wiped the sweat off his forehead, and shook his head. He finally passed the stage. Chu Li could not help but laugh when he heard this. He had been ignoring Yang Baoshu because he was afraid that he would cause trouble for him. This young man was rare. He was kind-hearted. He carried the braised meat to the east courtyard. Yang Su took it and cut it into pieces before putting it on a plate. Chu Li wanted to go back, since he had already eaten at the restaurant. Wait, Xiao Shi shouted. Chu Li looked at her. Xiao Shi was sitting on a garden stool in the courtyard, holding a book in her hand. She was frowning as she stared at him, her clear eyes flashing. Chu Li, are you hiding from me? Chu Li hesitated for a moment. No. I'm not stupid. Xiao Shi rolled her eyes at him and said gently, Chu Li, am I a spirit beast? Why are you so scared? Chu Li smiled. Why exactly? Xiao Shi scoffed. Chu Li said calmly, Lady Xiao, you're overthinking it. There's nothing like that. Humph. Xiao Shi's bright eyes flickered, and she smiled faintly. Chu Li, have you fallen for me? Chu Li quickly waved his hand. Xiao Shi laughed softly. Looks like I'm right. Chu Li smiled bitterly. Lady Xiao, I'll be honest. I'm a little worried that I can't control myself and really fall for you. You're the first beauty of the great Ji dynasty. Don't you like me? Xiao Shi's smile was even brighter, like a pearl. She knew her own charm. It was a pity that her heart was as calm as a lake, unable to fall for someone else. But teasing Chu Li was fun too. Excessive thoughts are the source of trouble. Chu Li sighed. Don't worry, Lady Xiao. I won't look for trouble. Xiao Shi said, men are like that. You can't be an exception. Chu Li nodded lightly. Xiao Shi suddenly felt disinterested and waved her hand. You can go. Chu Li smiled, stood up, and left. This Xiao Shi was really a jinx for men. Her beauty was unparalleled, gentle like water. Her smile was even more seductive, but her heart was as cold as stone. He was not afraid that he could not control himself and fall for Xiao Shi, but whenever he saw her, he would think of Xiao Qi, and his heart would ache. He subconsciously avoided seeing her. In the evening, the courtyard was filled with red clouds. Chu Li slowly swung his long sword in the courtyard, transforming the 7 forms of godly blade into the 7 forms of godly sword. He had always been unsatisfied with the power of the 7 forms of godly sword. He could not unleash the full power of the 7 forms of godly blade. It was like there was a layer of paper between them, just a little bit, but it could not be made up for no matter what. He knew that this was because his martial arts cultivation was still shallow, and he lacked the foundation. The process of training the 7 forms of godly sword was also the process of integrating martial arts, which was very beneficial to him. After Yang Baoshu had his meal, he practiced his martial arts for a while. Then he put a long ladder on the roof and climbed up, wanting to replace a broken roof tile. Suddenly, He saw Chu Li swinging his sword in the courtyard, and he chuckled and waved his hand to greet him. He knew that his neighbor was a weird person, and he did not pay attention to people, but he still had to greet him, or else he would feel uncomfortable. Chu Li nodded, and then slowly swung his sword. The technique was simple. The key was the harmony between the heart technique and the technique. It had to be perfect in order to unleash the full power. His movements could not be completely in sync with the heart technique, so he slowly swung his sword, trying to find that vague feeling. From an outsider's point of view, he was swinging his sword randomly, not practicing, but playing with it. Chu Li was not afraid that Yang Baoshu would see, so he focused on finding that vague feeling. Yang Baoshu stood on the roof, holding the tile in his hand, absent-mindedly looking at Chu Li from time to time. He was unusually curious. Ouch! He suddenly screamed, and then rolled down from the roof. Bam! He landed in Chu Li's courtyard. Chu Li turned around and looked at him. Yang Baoshu turned around and got up. He did not even bother to pat the dirt off. He scratched his head and smiled apologetically. I'm sorry. I've disturbed Mister's practice. Chu Li returned his sword to its sheath. Are you hurt? Since he landed in his courtyard, it was impossible to not have anything to do with him. So he greeted him. It's okay. I have thick skin. It's okay to fall. Yang Baoshu quickly said, I can see that. Chu Li said, for the past few days, he saw that Yang Baoshu came back with injuries every day. He was beaten up, and every night after dinner, he would take a secret manual and practice. From his point of view, it was no different from a child playing house. He would not be able to master it for a lifetime. Yang Baoshu looked at his sword and smiled. Mister, are you a martial arts master? Chu Li waved his hand. What a good sword! Yang Baoshu stared at the dark green sheath. He could not stop praising it. Good sword. Chu Li could not help but laugh. He could see what Yang Baoshu was thinking. The man was weird, and so was the sword. It was basically a wooden sword. It was gray, and the way he wielded the sword was also flowery. It was soft without a sword. Forget about killing people. It could not even kill a chicken. Fortunately, this weird man was too embarrassed to admit that he was a martial arts master. He did not lie. Chu Li placed the sword on the stone table. Let me pour you a cup of tea. He stood up, went into the house, and came out with a cup of tea. Yang Baoshu smiled embarrassedly. He took the teacup with both hands. As expected of a scholar, although he was arrogant and did not care about people, he was still polite when he came to his house. Chapter 282. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, pull some votes for Chijian's 515 fan day. Everyone gets 8 votes, and there will be some coins for voting. I'm begging for everyone's support. P.S. It's the last day of the double monthly vote. Please vote for me. Do you know swordsmanship? Chu Li asked. I don't know swordsmanship, but I really want to learn, Yang Baoshu replied. Chu Li shook his head. It's not easy to practice swordsmanship. They say that 3 years of knife training is 10 years of swordsmanship. I don't think they've used 10 years. They haven't mastered it yet. Is that so? Mister, have you mastered it yet? Yang Baoshu asked. Me? I'm still far from it. Chu Li smiled. I want to practice swordsmanship. Can I? It's not too late, right? Yang Baoshu asked. You're 18, right? If you practice for 10 years, 28 isn't too late. Chu Li gestured for him to sit down. Yang Baoshu asked, Mister, can you teach me? My swordsmanship isn't good enough. It's just a flowery style. Chu Li shook his head. Yang Baoshu looked at the long sword on the table in disappointment. Even if it was just a flowery style, it was better than not knowing anything. Looks like he's not willing to teach me. I'll have to ask my mother to prepare some gifts tomorrow. Shouldn't I? Chu Li lifted his teacup and took a sip. Yang Baoshu stood up and left. Before he left, he looked at the long sword on the table reluctantly. The next evening, he returned with a long piece of wood. After tinkering with it in the courtyard, he carved out a long sword. The shape and color were similar to the modesty sword, but it was a good craft. Chu Li was still practicing his swordsmanship under the setting sun. His movements were slow as he searched for that vague feeling. As long as he could capture this perfect fit, the omniscient mirror would be able to imprint it in his mind, and he would be considered to have mastered it. Unfortunately, this feeling was vague and unclear, as if there was a thick layer of fog covering it, and he could not touch it no matter how hard he tried. All the martial arts secret manuals that he had read in his mind were fusing together to attack this layer of fog, and he was trying his best to push it away. If one day was not enough, then 2 days were not enough, 3 days were not enough, and 2 days were not enough. He would succeed one day. While he was practicing, Yang Baoshu climbed up a ladder to the top of the wall and looked at him with a smile. Chu Li pretended not to see it and continued to practice his swordsmanship. Yang Baoshu waved his wooden sword and mimicked Chu Li's movements. He felt that using a wooden sword to practice this slow swordsmanship and sneaking a few glances was not considered a taboo in the martial arts world. It was a pity that he couldn't feel the power of this sword technique at all. When such a sword technique was used, even a chicken couldn't be killed. Chu Li closed his eyes and focused on the inside, ignoring the outside world. It was only when dusk came and the lanterns were lit that he stopped. When Yang Baoshu saw him open his eyes, he quickly waved his sword in greeting. "Mister, what do you think of my sword?" Chu Li glanced at it. "Good sword." Yang Baoshu beamed with joy. "Mister, let me tell you, my skills have been passed down in my family. No one in West Wall Street can compare to me." Chu Li nodded. "Great craftsmanship. Do you want me to make another one for you?" Yang Baoshu asked. "Wooden swords are quite fragile." "Thank you, but there's no need," Chu Li replied. "Oh, all right then. Just let me know when you want one in the future. I'll definitely get you a better one." Yang Baoshu replied disappointedly. "Ouch! Ah!" Yang Baoshu suddenly screamed and fell from the top of the wall. "Bastard, you even learned how to climb over the wall." Yang Baoshu's mother, Madame Zhou, yelled. "Bastard, you even learned how to climb over the wall. Why aren't you practicing your fist technique after eating? Why are you practicing with a broken sword? Are you crazy?" Yang Baoshu's mother, Madame Zhou, yelled at him. Yang Baoshu patted the mud off his body and said unhappily, "Mother, I'm practicing my sword. You haven't even mastered your fist technique yet. Why are you practicing your sword? Don't you know that you're biting off more than you can chew? Practice your fist technique properly. You're not allowed to sleep if you don't practice 20 times today." "Mother, how many times have I practiced it? This agile monkey fist is no good." Yang Baoshu said disapprovingly, "It's not powerful at all. I can't beat anyone. That's why I want to practice my sword. The agile monkey fist is no good. You're the one who's useless. Your father used to practice this fist technique. He became an escort and traveled far and wide. He's very prestigious. Why can't you do it?" Madame Zhou sneered. Yes, I'm useless." Yang Baoshu saw his mother's expression change and quickly admitted defeat. "I'll definitely practice it. 20 times, right? 20 times it is. That's more like it. Hurry up." Chu Li smiled. His omniscient mirror had already seen through Yang Baoshu's fist technique manual. The agile monkey fist was indeed extraordinary, but most people would not be able to practice it. All the spirit beasts had entered the 100,000 hills, such as the spirit tiger and the spirit monkey. Almost no one in the world had seen the spirit monkey before. As such, the essence of the agile monkey fist could not be grasped. It was only the agile monkey fist, but it could not be practiced to its full potential. Yang Baoshu had practiced the agile monkey fist like an orangutan fist. He had to use a lot of force, but he did not know that this was the opposite of the essence of the agile monkey fist. Even if he practiced for 100 years, he would not be able to grasp the essence of the agile monkey fist, and its power would be limited. That evening, Chu Li bought 2 boxes of pastries and returned home. Coincidentally, Yang Baoshu had returned as well. "Mister, you're back." Yang Baoshu greeted him warmly. Chu Li nodded slightly and did not say anything. Yang Baoshu helplessly scratched his head. "This weirdo is here again. Why does he pretend not to know me when we're on the streets? He doesn't even say a word to me. It's fine in my house. He's well-mannered. What a weirdo." Chu Li held the pastries in one hand and placed the other behind his back as he walked slowly. Yang Baoshu's pace was originally brisk, but seeing that Chu Li was walking so slowly, he could not be rude and overtake him. Therefore, he could only walk with him, making Yang Baoshu very anxious. Chu Li glanced at him and signaled with his eyes. Yang Baoshu understood that Chu Li wanted him to leave first, so he closed fist saluted and hurried away. Dusk fell, and the lanterns were lit. Chu Li was still practicing his swordsmanship in the courtyard. In the morning, he practiced the heavenly demonic power, the art of white tiger, and the sentient menace. In the afternoon, he practiced the scripture of duality and the 7 forms of godly sword at night. Other than the time he went out for a walk, he spent most of his time cultivating. Without any distractions, he calmed himself down and cultivated. His progress was very fast. He thought to himself that if he focused on cultivating like this, it would not be impossible for him to catch up to High Duke Lu. Unfortunately, this would not last long. What a pity! As he slowly practiced his swordsmanship, Yang Baoshu climbed up the wall again. Mister, my mother made some dumplings. Have a taste." As he spoke, he dragged the ladder up to Chu Li's courtyard and carried a plate of steaming hot dumplings down. Without waiting for Chu Li to speak, he placed it on the stone table. "My mother's cooking is very good too. Have a taste." As he spoke, he passed him a pair of chopsticks. Chu Li looked at him and took the chopsticks to taste a dumpling. Although the filling was vegetarian, his mouth was full of fragrance. It was indeed very good. "How is it? Delicious?" Yang Baoshu said proudly. "Not bad." Chu Li nodded in satisfaction. Recently, his mouth had suffered a lot. The restaurants in Qingyun town and Yangsu's cooking skills were far from Schwelling's. Suddenly eating such delicious food made him very emotional. Come, mister, sit down and eat." Yang Baoshu used his sleeve to wipe the wooden stump. Chu Li sat down. Yang Baoshu said again, "Mister, this sword is in the way." As he spoke, he pushed the treasure sword on the stone table to the side. He pushed it and showed a surprised expression. "This is not right. This is not a wooden sword. Mister, let me see this treasure sword. Just one look." Yang Baoshu stared at the modesty sword with a cheeky smile. Chu Li had already eaten 2 dumplings. "All right, I'll take a look." Chapter 283. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, I'd like to solicit votes for Qijian's 515 Fan Festival. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. "Thank you, sir." Yang Baoshu was overjoyed. He carefully picked up the modesty sword and almost dropped it when he felt its weight in his hand. It was definitely not an ordinary item. He had never seen such a heavy wooden sword before. If it was really a wooden sword, it would definitely be valuable. It seemed that Mr. Chu was really rich. The scabbard, the material, and the workmanship were definitely not ordinary. At first glance, it did not look like much, but after touching it carefully, he realized how valuable it was. Only those who knew their stuff would know how valuable this scabbard was. He was rich. He was really rich. Chu Li looked at Yang Baoshu's mesmerized expression and laughed to himself. After touching the scabbard carefully, Yang Baoshu became even more careful. He pressed the spring and slowly pulled out the modesty sword. "Be careful, don't cut your hand," Chu Li reminded him and continued eating his dumplings. Yang Baoshu nodded absent-mindedly and carefully looked at the body of the modesty sword. He looked at it from left to right and carefully touched it. It looked like wood, but it was definitely not a wooden sword. It should be a strange material. Needless to say, such a rare material that he had never heard of before must be expensive. He gently swung the sword and felt its weight. "Don't hurt yourself." Chu Li reminded him again. The modesty sword looked like a wooden sword, so people would subconsciously think that it was not sharp. In fact, it was the exact opposite. A novice like Yang Baoshu, who was sitting at the table and swinging the sword, could easily hurt himself. Yang Baoshu swung the sword and laughed. "How can I hurt myself?" Before he could finish, the tip of the sword hit the stone table. After all, he could not use it while sitting. A corner of the stone table silently fell. He did not feel anything, and did not even know that he had shaved the stone table. Bang! The stone table fell. Only then did he realize that something was wrong. He quickly looked down and saw the smooth cut, then looked at the modesty sword. His heart skipped a beat, and he was so scared that he almost threw it out. Fortunately, it hit the stone table. If it had really fallen on him, he would have lost a part of his body. It's a good sword." Yang Baoshu forced a smile at Chu Li. Chu Li smiled. "It's good for the body. It's for nourishing one's health. It's just for fun." Yang Baoshu carefully put the modesty sword back into its scabbard and let out a long sigh of relief before placing it back on the table. He smiled and said, "You must be an expert." "Oh, how high?" Chu Li asked casually. He continued eating the dumplings. Yang Baoshu said, "Mister, you must be a martial arts expert." A normal person would never use such a precious sword. Do I look like someone who practices martial arts? Chu Li smiled and ate the last dumpling. He let out a long sigh of satisfaction. Yang Baoshu eagerly served Chu Li a cup of tea. "I've heard that a lot of masters like to hide their abilities. The greatest recluse is hidden in the city, just like Mr. Chu." He. Chu Li laughed and shook his head. "All right, as a master, I'll give you a few words as thanks for the meal." "Please speak, Mr." Yang Baoshu stared at him excitedly. Chu Li said, "The spirit monkey is the most agile. It's lively and agile, just like your mind. The more agile your mind is, the more agile the spirit monkey will be." If that's the case, Yang Baoshu suddenly understood and said, "So I've practiced it wrongly?" Chu Li said, "I'm just talking about the spirit monkey. As for the spirit monkey fist, you'll have to figure it out yourself." "Thank you, Mr." Yang Baoshu said excitedly. He suddenly felt like he understood everything. Why was it so awkward to practice the spirit monkey fist? It was because he was using the wrong method. He was using the wrong force. He should not be using too much force, but should be more agile. If only he had listened to Mr. Chu earlier. He might have mastered the spirit monkey fist a long time ago. He took the bowl and chopsticks back to his courtyard and hurriedly sent them to the kitchen. He then ran to the courtyard and began practicing. As he practiced, he found the feeling of being agile. "Mr. Next Door, are you satisfied?" Yang Baoshu's mother came to the courtyard from the kitchen and watched him practice. "What kind of nonsense are you practicing? Look at how you've practiced your fist technique. It's so weird." "How is it weird?" Yang Baoshu asked as he practiced. No, that's not how your father practiced." Madame Zhou shook her head. "Mother, father practiced it wrongly." The spirit monkey fist is the spirit monkey fist. The spirit monkey is very agile. Yang Baoshu said. Don't talk nonsense. That's not how your father practiced. Madame Zhou scoffed. Yang Baoshu said. This is what Mr. Chu said. The spirit monkey is agile, just like a human's mind. Humph, he's not a martial artist. What does he know? Mr. Chu is a scholar. He read about the spirit monkey in books. If he's a scholar, why would he lie to me? He gave me pointers to repay you for your meal. Mr. Chu admires your cooking very much. Although he felt that Mr. Chu was an otherworldly master, he would be ridiculed if he told his mother. It was better not to say anything. You ate my meal, and you're still spouting nonsense. What a waste of my dumplings. Madame Zhou was indignant. Yang Baoshu quickly said, Mother, lower your voice. Mr. Chu can hear you. So what if he hears me? I didn't say anything wrong. She lowered her voice. Yang Baoshu said, Mother, I'll try it out first. If it's really wrong, I'll change it back. All right, you have to know what you're doing. Don't be fooled by his words. Yes, I know what I'm doing. Chu Li smiled as he listened to their conversation. Then he calmed down and continued practicing. After practicing the spirit monkey fist for half a night, Yang Baoshu felt that his skills had improved tremendously. He was unusually agile. Therefore, he left home early the next morning and went to the Flying Goose Association. The Flying Goose Association was a large courtyard. In the middle of the courtyard was a wide martial arts field with various weapons placed beside it. When he arrived, there were already more than 10 people practicing diligently. A tall and handsome young man came up to him. Baoshu, what's the good news? Why are you so happy? Zheng Xia, watch the show. I'm going to teach that Hu a lesson today. Yang Baoshu said confidently. Zheng Xia heard him and quickly pulled him back. Are you crazy? You should be thankful that he's not looking for trouble with you. Why are you looking for trouble with him? It's time for me to take my revenge. Yang Baoshu scoffed. Our martial arts are not as good as Hu Yu's. Zheng Xia said softly. How are we going to fight? I've found the essence of the spirit monkey fist. This time, I'm going to beat him until he's begging for mercy. Yang Baoshu scoffed. The essence of the spirit monkey fist? Zheng Xia was skeptical. Hey, isn't this Brother Baoshu? Suddenly, a sarcastic voice came from behind them. Yang Baoshu and Zheng Xia turned around and stared. A skinny, small, and tanned young man stared at them with a smile. There was a lazy, sarcastic smile on his small, tanned face. Brother Baoshu, you're early today. Why are you suddenly so diligent? Do you want to practice martial arts well? Hu Yu, let's spar. Yang Baoshu said angrily. Yo! Hu Yu let out a strange cry and said, gesticulating? You said we should spar? Yang Baoshu puffed up his chest. Hu Yu said, that's not spar. I'm going to beat you up. I'm going to beat you up this time. Yang Baoshu snorted. You're going crazy today. Hu Yu chuckled. You want to beat me up? Sure, let's see who's going to beat who up. Take this. As soon as he finished speaking, he threw a punch. Yang Baoshu leaped and dodged it easily. Hey, you've grown up. Hu Yu laughed strangely and pounced forward. His dark fists were small, fast, and ruthless. Yang Baoshu was able to maintain his agility at first as he dodged here and there. However, after more than 10 moves, he was hit by a punch and was flustered. He was instantly enraged and used all his strength. Hu Yu gave him a good beating. If Zheng Xia had not desperately stopped him, Hu Yu would not have given up. Chapter 284. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, I'd like to garner votes for Qijian's 515 Fan Festival. Everyone has 8 votes, and you'll even get some coins for voting. P.S. There's not much time left. Can you reach 5,000 votes? Do you want to read 6 updates a day? Hu Yu laughed proudly as he left. He went to the training ground to continue practicing. Zheng Xia helplessly looked at Yang Baoshu, whose head was bleeding. He shook his head. Is this the essence of the agile monkey fist? Zheng Xia helped him cover his forehead. There was a cut on his forehead. Yang Baoshu covered his nose to stop the blood from flowing out. He said in a muffled voice, I haven't mastered it, but I'm doing it the right way. Didn't you see how many of his moves I blocked? I think it's useless, Zheng Xia said. You can't hit him at all. I'll continue practicing. I'll definitely beat him up and take my revenge, Yang Baoshu said, resentfully. Zheng Xia asked, Where did you learn the essence of the agile monkey fist? An expert taught me, Yang Baoshu said. Zheng Xia laughed. Yang Baoshu said, Why? You don't believe me? I believe you. I believe you. Zheng Xia quickly nodded. Go sit over there for a while. I'll wash up and apply some ointment for you. Otherwise, your mother will beat you up again when we get home. Yang Baoshu had suffered many punches. It was not obvious yet, but it would become bruised and swollen after a while. Sigh. Yang Baoshu sighed, helplessly. When he returned home in the evening, the bruises had not completely disappeared. Seeing him in an even worse state, Madame Zhou scolded. Are you done? Is this the agile monkey you were talking about? Agile my foot. He was beaten up so badly. What agile monkey? I think he's a dead monkey. Mother, I didn't practice well. I'll definitely be able to take my revenge if I practice for a few more days. Yang Baoshu quickly said, What's the point of practicing? I fought better than before today, and that's why he was so ruthless. I'll definitely improve and surpass him. Yang Baoshu quickly said, Really? Madame Zhou was skeptical. Mother, I want to practice at home for a few days. Yang Baoshu said, I'll practice in isolation. All right, if you can't beat Hu after a few more days, you're not allowed to practice anymore. Madame Zhou scoffed. All right. Yang Baoshu quickly agreed. He did not leave the house for a few days. He had been practicing all this time. When he was tired, he would meditate and adjust his breathing to recover his strength. Sometimes she would sneak a peek at the next door and see Chu Li sitting cross-legged on the stone table, not moving at all. He felt that he was becoming more and more mysterious. He must be an expert who was practicing internal energy. It was a pity that his inner force cultivation method was only the basic cultivation method of the lowest level disciples of the Flying Goose Gang. It was useless in battle, but it was good for recovering his strength. 5 days later, in the morning, Yang Baoshu and Hu Yu stood facing each other in the martial arts field of the Flying Swan Association, while Zheng Xia stood beside them. Yang Baoshu was tall and sturdy, while Hu Yu was short, thin, and dark. The two of them were half a head apart. Training in seclusion? Hu Yu chuckled. Sure, you have ambition. I want to see how much you've grown. You with the surname, Hu, I'll beat you to death. Yang Baoshu scoffed. He was full of confidence. He felt that his agile monkey fist was getting better and better. It was getting deeper and stronger. Watch my fist. Hu Yu let out a strange laugh as he pounced forward. Yang Baoshu leaped nimbly and dodged the black, small, and heavy fist. Ouch again. Hu Yu chased after him with a strange laugh. Yang Baoshu darted around like a monkey. He dodged Hu Yu's fists, and in the blink of an eye, they had exchanged more than 20 blows. Hu Yu chased after him and shouted, Come on, Baoshu. Why don't you come and beat me to death? Why are you running? Yang Baoshu kept dodging and darting around. In the past, he could not run even if he wanted to. Now that he had improved and mastered the agile monkey fist, his body movement technique was more agile. Baoshu, This is not called the agile monkey fist. It's called the bereaved dog fist. Just keep running. Hu Yu chased after him and laughed. Your bereaved dog fist is very powerful. It can be used to escape. You're asking for a beating. Yang Baoshu shouted and leaped forward. Bam! Hu Yu was caught off guard, and his thin, dark face was punched. Yang Baoshu! Hu Yu was enraged. His small and black fists rained down on Yang Baoshu like falling stones. Yang Baoshu dodged a few blows, but he could not dodge anymore. His face and body were punched many times. Zheng Xia quickly came over and held Hu Yu back, but he was also punched twice by Hu Yu. Hu Yu touched his face angrily and scoffed. I'll spare your life this time for Zheng Xia's sake. Yang Baoshu covered his nose and glared at him. I'll beat you to death next time. Hu Yu was so angry that he wanted to throw a punch. Zheng Xia quickly stood in front of Yang Baoshu. Hu Yu, don't go too far. Hu Yu glared at Yang Baoshu. I'll teach you a lesson next time. Zheng Xia applied some ointment on his face and said, Baoshu, are you really practicing the agile monkey fist, right? It's not working. Didn't you notice that I punched him? Yang Baoshu said excitedly. Did I improve? Hee, it feels good to punch him. This, Zheng Xia thought for a while. Hu Yu was right. Your fist technique is quite useful for escaping. Yang Baoshu glared at him. He felt that Mr. Chu was right. The agile monkey fist should be practiced this way. It was not that he did not practice it correctly, but that he did not practice it well enough. When evening came, he reluctantly walked back. When he reached the main street, his footsteps became slower. Zheng Xia's ointment was good. His uncle was the commander of the Sharp Metal clan, and he stole the ointment from his uncle. However, no matter how good the ointment was, it could not completely remove the bruises on his face. When he returned home, he would definitely be beaten by his mother. His eyes lit up when he saw Chu Li carrying a basket of fruits. His white robe fluttered as he slowly walked over. Mr. Yang Baoshu quickly gave him a fist salute. Chu Li glanced at him, but did not say anything. He continued walking slowly as if he did not know him. Yang Baoshu was already used to it. He knew that Chu Li would ignore him outside. Therefore, he quickened his pace and returned home. Naturally, he was beaten up. Madame Zhou strictly forbade him from practicing recklessly. Yang Baoshu could not dissuade his mother, so he could only practice obediently. The more he practiced, the more awkward it became. However, when he left the house and went to the martial arts field of the Flying Swan Association, he still followed his own ideas and moved nimbly. The evening mist was heavy and the sky was dark. Chu Li was practicing his swordsmanship. Yang Baoshu climbed up the wall with a ladder and held a plate of dumplings in his hand. He chuckled as he lifted the ladder and placed the dumplings on the stone table. He passed a pair of chopsticks to Chu Li. Mister, have a taste. Chu Li put down his sword and took the chopsticks. Didn't your mother refuse to cook for me? Sigh, my mother has a sharp tongue but a soft heart. She said that a man like you might not know how to cook, Yang Baoshu said with a smile. Mister, thank you for your guidance. I'm much better now. Chu Li focused on eating the dumplings. Mister, what kind of swordsmanship are you practicing? What do you think? It must be very profound. It's just a normal health maintenance technique. Yang Baoshu nodded in agreement. It did not seem like a swordsmanship for killing people. It was more like a swordsmanship for strengthening one's body. His treasured sword was heavy, so this kind of training technique was indeed useful for strengthening one's body. Chu Li slowly finished his dumplings and wiped his mouth with a handkerchief. All right, show me the agile monkey fist. Chapter 285. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, pull some votes for Chijian's 5/15 Fan Day. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. Chu said, I don't really understand it. I'm just looking around. All right. Yang Baoshu quickly got up. He moved his limbs, and his face turned serious as he started to perform a set of fist techniques. His movements were light and agile, and his tall body seemed to have shrunk. He bent his waist and shrunk his back as he jumped in and out, looking like a monkey. Chu nodded. Yang Baoshu was indeed talented. It was rare for him to be able to cultivate the agile monkey fist to this level with just a fist manual. After Yang Baoshu finished a round of agile monkey fist, he looked at Chu Li. Chu Li muttered, I'll say this first. I'm just saying, don't take it seriously. Yang Baoshu stared at him. Sir, please speak. Chu Li said, if anyone asks, just say that you figured it out yourself, and that you're enlightened. Yes, I won't talk about you. Yang Baoshu quickly nodded. It seemed like Sir Chu was indeed a master, and one that did not want others to know about. Yang Baoshu's luck was great. Chu Li stood up and tied his shirt to his waist. Punch me. Yang Baoshu carefully punched. Chu Li lowered his body and shrunk behind him. Yang Baoshu's heart skipped a beat, and when he turned around, the fist was already in front of his eyes. Chu Li said, Don't hold back. Then be careful, sir. Yang Baoshu was sure that he had met a master, so he quickly pulled himself together and punched with all his might. Chu Li lowered his body and kicked out. Bang! Yang Baoshu somersaulted and rolled away. He got up and said excitedly, This technique can be used like this. Chu Li said, Continue. Yang Baoshu gave it his all and was continuously hit. Chu Li was using the agile monkey fist, but the agile monkey fists in his hands, every move was exquisite and precise. It was unavoidable. The agile monkey fist only had 36 forms, and Chu Li performed them one by one, showing the subtleties to Yang Baoshu. Yang Baoshu eagerly learned. He had practiced the agile monkey fist for over 10 years. Just by practicing this set of agile monkey fists, he would be able to execute it even with his eyes closed. He was extremely familiar with it. At this moment, it was as if a whole new world had opened up before his eyes. Chu Li retracted his fist and lowered his collar. Let's stop here. Don't greet me on the streets again. Tell your mother to speak ill of me outside. Yang Baoshu regained his senses and widened his eyes. Chu Li said, Do as I say. All right. Yang Baoshu nodded and asked, Why is that? Because my enemy is too powerful. Killing you is no different from killing a chicken. Chu Li said, You're not afraid of death, but what about your mother? Yang Baoshu nodded vigorously. I understand. I will definitely make mother speak ill of you. Chu Li smiled and waved his hand. If you want to come again in the future, wait until nighttime. Come here quietly and don't let anyone know. Yes. Yang Baoshu quickly replied. When he thought of his mother, he sighed helplessly. Sir was so powerful, and his enemy was not weak either. If he really caused his mother to die, he would really be an unfilial son and a sinner for all eternity. It seemed like he must not let anyone see him coming here in the future. Chu Li said, Go. Yang Baoshu reluctantly bid farewell and left. He bowed deeply at the top of the wall. Chu Li waved his hand and picked up his sword again. He began to practice leisurely. Yang Baoshu suddenly realized that Sir Chu seemed to be sad and lonely. It was really pitiful for him to live here alone. However, he did not expect Sir Chu to be a master. His luck was too good. Yang Baoshu shut himself in his house and practiced hard for the whole day. Early the next morning, he came to the martial arts field to wait for Hu Yu. Zhang Xia saw that he came so early and knew that he was going to challenge Hu Yu again. He sighed helplessly and walked over. Baoshu, you still want to fight Hu Yu? This time, I will beat him until he pisses his pants. Young Baoshu was in high spirits and full of confidence. Zhang Xia had seen his expression twice and did not believe it anymore. He sighed. Brother, let's wait a little longer. Practice some more, practice some more. I'm done, Zhang Xia. Just wait for the show. Yang Baoshu scoffed. He suddenly shouted, Hu Yu, get over here. Hu Yu was bowing and following behind a middle-aged man. His tanned and small face was full of smiles. He was happier than when he saw his own mother. Everyone in the martial arts field heard Yang Baoshu's shout loud and clear. The middle-aged man in front of Hu Yu turned around. Zhang Xia pulled Yang Baoshu's sleeve. Oh no, it's my uncle. The middle-aged man was burly and had a square face. He looked dignified and righteous. He was the acute Metal Clan's commander, Zhang Jin. His eyes were like lightning, shining brightly. It was as if he could see through one's heart and see through all evil tricks. Hu Yu whispered a few words to Zhang Jin. Zhang Jin frowned and looked at Yang Baoshu from afar. Yang Baoshu fist saluted. Zhang Xia's expression was solemn as he bowed meticulously. Zhang Jin walked over slowly and looked at Yang Baoshu, shouting and yelling, what a disgrace. Yes, Commander Zhang, I want to challenge Hu Yu. Yang Baoshu quickly said, Challenge? Can you defeat Hu Yu? Zhang Jin scoffed. Of course. Yang Baoshu shouted. Hu Yu scoffed. Baoshu, stop fooling around. Who's fooling around? Hu Yu, I'm going to beat you to death. Yang Baoshu glared at him and said angrily, I'm going to beat you to death. Hu Yu cursed. He quickly bowed and apologized. Commander, I've lost my composure. Zhang Jin said, All right, I'd like to see what you're capable of. Let's compete now. Hu Yu coughed and said helplessly, Commander, let's not embarrass ourselves, shall we? I've heard that your black stone fist technique is quite impressive, Zhang Jin said. As for Yang Baoshu, he knew him the best. Yang Baoshu was a good kid, but his martial arts skills were not up to par. His personality was also a little impulsive and immature. It would be difficult for him to take on such a big responsibility, so he needed to learn from each other. All right. Hu Yu's spirit was lifted as he agreed excitedly. He understood the commander's hidden meaning. If he performed well, he might be entrusted with an important task and become a leader from the lowest rank. He was so excited that he wanted to jump up. This was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He had to perform well to let the commander know that he was worthy of the responsibility. Come on, Baoshu, let's see how much you've improved. Hu Yu scoffed. Yang Baoshu said coldly, You go first. Watch my fist. Hu Yu took a step forward and threw a punch. Yang Baoshu's tall body shrunk. In a flash, he appeared behind Hu Yu and punched the back of Hu Yu's head. Ouch! Hu Yu screamed as he turned his head to attack. Yang Baoshu jumped to the side to avoid the punch, but at the same time, he punched Hu Yu's shoulder. Hu Yu was shocked, but he quickly regained his spirit. This was a good opportunity for him, and he did not want to fail miserably. This kid's fist technique had really changed. It was tricky and strange. Hit! Yang Baoshu screamed as he punched Hu Yu's back, followed by his neck and the back of his head. Each of his attacks was extremely vicious. In the blink of an eye, Hu Yu was hit more than 10 times. His inner energy was far superior to Yang Baoshu's. Although he did not suffer any serious injuries, his face was burning hot. It was too embarrassing. Hit! Hit! Yang Baoshu screamed as he punched Hu Yu. His screams became faster and faster. Chapter 286. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, pull some votes for Chidian's 515 Fan Day. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. I beg for everyone's support and appreciation. Huyu flew into a rage out of humiliation and shouted angrily, "Ah!" He forcefully pushed Yang Baoshu away as his body sped up, and so did his fists. "Fight!" Yang Baoshu yelled as he ducked behind Chu Li, who seemed to have eyes on the back of his head as he met Chu Li's fist with his own. Just as Yang Baoshu's fists collided with Huyu's, his footsteps suddenly slid to the side. He managed to dodge Huyu's punch by a hair's breadth, and his fist hit Huyu's back. Huyu's fist hit empty air, so he sent out another punch. Yang Baoshu ducked to avoid it. Huyu's other punch arrived, followed by another, falling like raindrops. Like a monkey, Yang Baoshu squirmed in and out of Yang Baoshu's fists. From time to time, he would land 1 or 2 punches. "Are my ribs swollen?" Instantaneous spring of ballast in just a short while. Huyu's face had been punched more than 10 times, and the corners of his mouth and eyes were bleeding. "Stop!" Zheng Jin shouted in a deep voice. "Fight!" Yang Baoshu yelled as he retreated to Zheng Xia's side. Zheng Xia sized up his good brother in amazement. What a good, agile monkey fist. Huyu's dark face turned even darker. He forced a smile at Zheng Jin and said, "Commander, I have lost." "Your fist technique is pretty good." Zheng Jin nodded in satisfaction. "From tomorrow onwards, you will lead 5 people." Huyu was startled for a moment before he was overjoyed. "Many thanks, Incense Master. This subordinate will definitely sacrifice his life to repay Incense Master's great kindness. All right." Zheng Jin waved his hand dismissively. "Do your best, and that will be your repayment to me." "Huyu, what do you think of Yang Baoshu's fist technique?" "The fist technique is very powerful." Huyu exclaimed in admiration. He wasn't this powerful in the past. "It's really an eye-opener for me. It's just that his inner strength is a little lacking. It would be even better if his inner strength was a little deeper." His inner energy was much stronger than Yang Baoshu's. Not bad." Zheng Jin nodded lightly. "Ha! So lively!" A loud laugh came from the door. A burly middle-aged man strode over and quickly arrived in front of them. He looked at Yang Baoshu and then at Huyu. Then he gave Zheng Jin a fist salute and smiled. "Elder Zheng, I heard that they fought. Old Hu, your green wood hall has produced another talented person." Zheng Jin indifferently said, "How about it? Can you part with your treasured book and transfer it to the sharp metal hall?" "Baoshu, this child cannot be given to you." Hu Zhongping looked dignified and honest. He waved his hand and chuckled, "Young lad, your aptitude isn't bad. I'm looking for an opportunity to give him some pointers. You can't snatch it from me." "All right then." Zheng Jin didn't say anything more and turned to leave. After he left, Hu Zhongping looked at Yang Baoshu and sized him up. Yang Baoshu looked at Hu Zhongping calmly. "Commander, I beat Huyu up." Huyu, who had been following Zheng Jin for a short distance, stopped and turned around. "Yang Baoshu, just you wait. I'll deal with you tomorrow." Yang Baoshu puffed out his chest. "I'll be waiting. I'll beat you to death." Huyu sneered and hurriedly followed Zheng Jin. Hu Zhongping smiled and said, "Baoshu, come, show me the agile monkey fist again." "All right." Yang Baoshu answered and quickly performed the agile monkey fist. "You're quite intelligent. Good lad. How did you cultivate it to this level?" "Commander, let me tell you, this is amazing." Yang Baoshu's eyes lit up, and he said excitedly, "I had a dream the night before yesterday. In the dream, I met an old man with a white beard. He taught me the agile monkey fist. I don't remember what he said, but when I woke up, I suddenly understood. Commander, is this a dream transmission? Yang Baoshu became even more excited as he asked, Commander, is this a dream transmission? Is there a master who wants to take me as a disciple? Baoshu, you have to be down to earth. Don't think too much. Hu Zhongping chuckled and patted his shoulder. But you're able to understand. It's true that you're sincere. It's rare. It's rare. Commander, Hu Yu was defeated. Commander Zheng even promoted him to be a small leader among the 5. Yang Baoshu smiled. You want to be a small leader? Commander, do you think I can be one? Sure, but you'll have to listen to Zheng Xia, Hu Zhongping said. Yang Baoshu looked at Zheng Xia. He's a small leader. I'm also a small leader. Why do I have to listen to him? Zheng Xia looked helpless. Hu Zhongping said, because you're not as smart as Zheng Xia. That's true. All right, I'll listen to Zheng Xia. Yang Baoshu thought about it and sighed. Then he became excited again. The salary of a small leader among the 5 would be doubled to 1 tael of silver a month. Now, his family would be well off. His mother would no longer need to weave cloth and make clothes for others. She would be able to enjoy life with him. When Yang Baoshu returned home, the lanterns were already lit. He bought some meat and some snacks. When he reached home, he told Madame Zhou, who was waiting anxiously. Madame Zhou was overjoyed and excitedly patted Yang Baoshu's head. Her son was finally successful. She then talked about his father. The dead man was unlucky. If he was still alive, he would be able to enjoy life with her son. She did not care that it was already dark and started to cook. She fried a big plate of meat and asked Yang Baoshu to send it to Chu Li. Yang Baoshu climbed up the ladder and was about to say something when he was stunned. Why was there a woman in Chu Li's courtyard? Her back was facing him, so he could not see her face clearly. However, just by looking at her back, he could tell that she was a great beauty. 3 lanterns were lit in the courtyard. Chu Li was playing chess with Xiao Shi at the stone table while Yang Su was helping him clean up the house. Chu Li had not been there for 2 days. Now that Xiao Shi had come personally, he could not just reject him. She dragged him to play chess, saying that it was too boring to stay in the courtyard and wanted to take a walk to get some fresh air. Seeing Yang Baoshu standing on the wall, Chu Li waved his hand. Yang Baoshu quickly brought the ladder over and brought a plate of meat and a plate of rice. Sir, did I disturb you? Not at all. Your mother is making delicious food again. Bring it over, Chu Li said. Yang Baoshu brought the plate to the table. Xiao Shi, who had been frowning in deep thought, looked up and looked over. Boom. Yang Baoshu's mind went blank as soon as he saw Gu Shizhou's beautiful face. It was as if a thunderbolt had struck his head. His body froze, and he let go of the plate. Chu Li took it and placed it on the table. Xiao Shi pursed her lips and smiled. She looked at Chu Li, who had already picked up his chopsticks and started eating. Didn't you eat? I'm not full yet. It's fine to eat a little more. Seems like your culinary skills are great. It's all right. Chu Li ate quickly. Although Xiao Shi smelled the aroma, she did not care. She had been weak since young and had a bad appetite. She had long lost her appetite. After Chu Li finished the plate of meat and the plate of rice, he let out a long sigh of relief. Yang Baoshu was still staring at Xiao Shi without moving. Xiao Shi did not seem to see him and treated him like he was invisible. She continued to frown in deep thought. The situation on the chessboard was not in her favor. She was not convinced. Yang Su came out of the house and smiled. Chief, who is this? Chu Li pointed to the east. Yang Su suddenly understood. She pursed her lips and looked at Yang Baoshu. She washed the 2 plates and placed them on the table. Chu Li coughed. Yang Baoshu came back to his senses. His face was as red as a red cloth. Chapter 287. P.S. Here's today's update. And at the same time, pull some votes for Chijin's 5/15 Fan Day. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. I beg for everyone's support and appreciation. Chuli asked, did something good happen today? Yes. Yang Baoshu's gaze involuntarily drifted towards Xiao Shi. Xiao Shi rested her chin on her snow-white hand. Her jade-like face glowed with a gentle luster under the light, as if it was carved out of a piece of white jade. There was a faint blush on her cheeks. Yang Baoshu could not imagine that such a beautiful person existed in this world. Xiao Shi stared at the chessboard without moving an inch. Her brows were slightly furrowed, as if she was annoyed. Yang Baoshu felt as if his heart was about to melt. Chuli asked, what's the good news? Oh, I became a small leader in the gang. Yang Baoshu tried his best to avert his gaze, but he still glanced at her from time to time. He hoped that she would hear his words and look up at him again. Chuli found it interesting and said gently, not bad. The salary of a small leader is quite high. It's enough for your family to live on. Your mother doesn't have to work anymore. Yes, Yang Baoshu smiled. In the end, she still did not raise her head to look at him. It's inevitable that factions will fight each other. Don't rush forward recklessly. Use the agile monkey fist to deal with your opponent, Chuli said solemnly. Yang Baoshu forced himself to regain his composure and nodded vigorously. Yes, mister. It's done. Xiao Shi let out a long sigh of relief. She gently placed a white chess piece on the board and smiled. Yang Baoshu's smile was as beautiful as a flower. All he could see was a bright light in front of him, and the sky and earth were suddenly lit up. It was as if it was not nighttime, but a sunny, cloudless morning. Chu Li was worried that he would not be able to pull himself out of it, so he passed him the plate. Go ahead. Then I'll take my leave. Yang Baoshu reluctantly turned around and slowly climbed up the ladder. As he climbed up the wall, he turned around to look behind him and realized that Xiao Shi was urging Chu Li to make his next move. He was filled with melancholy and disappointment. He walked down slowly. Bang! Ouch! He forgot to put the ladder back and missed a step, falling to the ground. What are you doing? Madame Zhou came out to take a look and said unhappily, have you lost your soul? The plates are all broken. Mother, I'm fine, Yang Baoshu said. Madame Zhou grunted, I know you're fine. The plate broke. Chuli shook his head and laughed. Xiao Shi asked, he's your disciple? She ignored Yang Baoshu for his own good. She knew her charm very well, so she spoke to him gently and kindly. That was teasing others, and it might even affect them for the rest of their lives. Indifference was the best way to deal with it. Chuli shook his head. It's rare to find someone with a pure and kind nature. I just gave him a few pointers. You just don't think there's enough trouble. Xiao Shi stared at the chessboard. They were people from 2 different worlds, and their statuses were worlds apart. If they left this place, they would never meet again. So why bother? Chuli said, he's a good seed. With proper nurturing, he might grow into a towering tree. Qinyan City was the closest to the divine capital. The position was extremely important. Planting a spy here might be of great use in the future. He's so dumb. What can he accomplish? Xiao Shi said. She admired Chu Li's calmness and wisdom. He did not change his expression in the face of her beauty and remained unmoved. As for those who were scared out of their wits at the sight of her, she looked down on them and did not want to bother with them. Chu Li shook his head and said, Time makes the hero. We can't underestimate him. He usually strolled around leisurely. He knew the whole of Qin Yun's city very well, and nothing could be hidden from him. The Swan Goose Association was inconspicuous in Qin Yun City. They were located in the slums and did not have much to offer. They were a group of poor people who gathered together to prevent others from bullying them. However, they were well-informed and did not attract attention. They could do many things that others could not. Anyway, don't forget what we're here for. Seosher stared at the chessboard and said, casually. Chuli smiled. We'll change places in a few days. Seosher looked up at him. You still want to change? It won't be worse than here, right? Are you used to living here? How's it compared to the High Duke's public house? Chuli asked. What do you think? Seosher scoffed. Chuli smiled. I don't know what the next place will be like. Seosher said, I hope you'll get used to it. Young Baoshu spoke to Madame Zhou for a while and laid on the bed, absent-mindedly. He looked up at the roof beam. His mind was filled with Seosher's beautiful face. He was distracted, and his heart was sweet and melancholic. He tossed and turned, unable to sleep. He got up and opened the window to look at the bright moon in the sky. Who was she to Mr. Chu? Looking at the way they talked, she seemed to be Mr. Chu's wife. Even if she was not his wife, they were very close. To be able to talk to such a beauty was a great blessing. Mr. Chu was able to face her and play chess with her. It was a blessing that he had accumulated in his past life. Thinking about the situation when they met, he felt even more humble. He could not help but let out a long sigh at the moon. It was the first time in his life that he felt melancholic. He felt lost, but he could not describe it. He looked at the moon, and as he looked, his heart skipped a beat. A strong impulse was boiling in his chest. This was how a man should be. Mr. Chu was not old, maybe only a few years older than him, but he was a hidden master of the martial arts world. He did not lack money, and he had a beautiful wife. Looking at himself, they were both human, but why was there such a big difference? If he was like Mr. Chu, with such a beautiful woman by his side, his life would not be in vain. If he lived a humble and ordinary life like this, it would be a waste of his life. Thinking about this, he leaped out of the window and practiced his fist technique under the moonlight. He was only a small leader now. If he wanted to have such a beauty, he would need to become a commander or even a leader. He still had a long way to go before he became an innate master. After practicing his fist technique for a while, he leaped back to the brick bed and sat cross-legged to adjust his breath and activate his heart technique. Chuli sat in the courtyard and saw through his thoughts. He shook his head and laughed. It seemed like all men were the same. The source of motivation was women. The young Baoshu who had seen Seosher and the young Baoshu who had not were two different people. He could see his own shadow in him. Unfortunately, the world was difficult. Not everything would go according to his wishes. When he first left the temple and came to the house of High Dukes, his ambition was overwhelming. He wanted to have all the beauties in the world, obtain power, and become the world's #1 master. In such a short time, his mindset had changed. Having Seochi was better than having all the beauties in the world, but he could not have her because he was too weak. He had been chasing after power, and he was already a rank 2 chief of the House of High Dukes. But compared to Princeton, compared to the Emperor, although his martial arts was grandmaster, he still had to look up to enlightened masters. To become an enlightened master, he had 3 choices. He could go to the Tempest Temple, become the emperor, or cultivate the heavenly demonic power. If he failed to cultivate the heavenly demonic power, he could only think about the emperor. He stood under the moonlight and stared at the night sky. He felt lost. What was Seochi doing now? Was she cultivating hard? Had she forgotten about him? Would he occasionally appear in her mind? When she thought of him, would her heart not be disturbed? So what if they met again? When would his path of pursuit come to an end? Would he fall on the path of pursuit? Would he not even see Seo Chi in the end? As he thought about this, he activated the heavenly demonic power and moved slowly under the moonlight. He suddenly frowned and turned to look to the east. Under the moonlight, 3 people floated over like 3 wisps of gray smoke. In the blink of an eye, they floated in front of Chu Li. The 3 elders looked gloomy as they stared at him coldly. The skinny elder in the middle scoffed. "Where is the second lady?" Chapter 288. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, pull some votes for Chidian's 515 Fan Day. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. I beg for everyone's support and appreciation. P.S. The 3rd Guild Master has been born, Guild Master V1 Goss. P.S. Although the monthly votes did not reach 5,000, there are still 6 updates today. Thank you for your support. The next update will be at 13. In the morning, Gentle Bandit would give out a big red packet and a single chapter explanation. Chu Li looked at the 3 of them and asked, "Who are the 3 of you?" "Chu Li, right?" The red-haired elder in the middle said in a deep voice, "You don't need to know our identities. Hand over the second miss, and we'll spare your life." Chu Li asked, "How did the people from the imperial residence of King and find this place?" He could see the thoughts of the other 3. Killing himself was the first priority. As for the second lady, if he saw her, he would save her. Even if he couldn't see her, it was fine as long as he killed Chu Li. It seemed like King and saw him as a thorn in his side, and he had to get rid of him first. Humph, why ask so many questions? Are you going to speak or not? The red-haired old man said in a deep voice. Chu Li frowned. What does His Highness King and want to do? Second Miss is the future princess. As subordinates, we don't know much. We only know to ask Second Miss to return. Anyone who dares to stop us will be killed without mercy. I see. Chu Li nodded. It seemed like they did not know that he was a grandmaster. Previously, when facing Lu Dongchu's provocation, he had been restraining himself from making a move, all in order to conceal this fact. And now, it was proving to be of use. However, after this, Kingham would know. The 3 of them received orders to find him in this area and kill him. As for how they found him, they didn't know either. They were just following orders. Where is the second miss? The red-haired old man was a little impatient. Don't play tricks. Don't force us to kill you. Chu Li smiled. I don't know where the second lady is either. None of them were fools, even if he looked like a harmless innate realm expert. The red-haired old man was still trying to numb him and break his will to fight to the death. It seemed that they only wanted to find the second miss, so they wouldn't kill him. Get a confession out of him. The red-haired old man frowned and said, We don't dare to kill second miss, but it's not a problem for you. Do it. The 3 of them punched out. Chu Li waved his hands, and 2 rays of light flashed. Chi, chi. With a light whistling sound, the 2 flying knives instantly pierced through the 2 old men. The distance was too close. The flying dagger was also too fast. Just as the 2 of them were about to dodge, they happened to be channeling their internal energy into their fists and throwing them outwards. They were at the most critical moment when the old force had dissipated and the new force could not be generated. Chu Li saw through this with the omniscient mirror and hit the target with 1 strike. The 2 of them clutched their chests, their eyes widened in disbelief as they slowly fell down. Now that Chu Li was a grandmaster, the power of his flying blades was getting more and more terrifying. They could not defend against it. His heart was pierced by a knife, and all the strength in his body leaked out from his heart. They hurriedly took out pills from their robes and threw them into their mouths. "Brat, you dare!" The red-haired old man was enraged. With a roar, he fiercely pushed out his palm, and the palm energy crashed towards him like a raging wave. Chu took a step to the side to avoid it. The art of infinite azure sea was converted into the scripture of duality. Spiritual chi surged in from all directions. He channeled the scripture of duality like a galloping horse. His white robe fluttered even though there was no wind. It was as if he was standing in a gale. Bang! The red-haired elder's palm struck the stone table. Bang! The stone table flew out. It crashed into the wall, and a huge hole was formed. The wall shook, and the sound was especially loud in the night sky. Yang Baoshu was thinking. He tossed and turned, and when he heard the commotion, he quickly climbed up the ladder and peeked out. The moonlight was like water, and he could see clearly there were two people lying on the ground, and it was unknown whether they were dead or alive. A red-haired elder struck out his palm. Wherever the palm energy passed, the soil flew, and the sand and stones rolled. It was a shocking sight. This must be the legendary Grandmaster. Yang Baoshu's eyes widened as he saw Mr. Chu's white robe fluttering in the wind. He easily avoided the palm energy, and his white robe was spotless. He lightly struck out with his fist. The red-haired elder roared and pushed his palm forward. His roar was like thunder. Yang Baoshu's ears were ringing, and he quickly covered them. He knew that it was dangerous, and he should not watch from here. The wisest thing to do was to retreat and stay in the house. However, a strong urge drove him, and he did not move. If he wanted to live like Mr. Chu, then he would have to see how capable Mr. Chu was, and how far he could go. Bang! A muffled sound was heard, and the red-haired elder groaned as he staggered backward. Chu Li's light punch was learned from Haiduke Liu, and its power was shocking. The red-haired elder stared with his eyes wide open, and roared, "Chu Li, come again!" He pushed out another palm, and Chu Li punched again. Bang! The red-haired elder's body flew out, and he crashed into the house. Chu Li scoffed. This red-haired elder was a cunning fellow. He followed the punch into the house and wanted to capture Xiao Shi. Unfortunately, he did not expect Xiao Shi to not be in the courtyard. She was his bodyguard, and he wanted to live in the same house. It was rare for Chu Li to have two courtyards, and the red-haired elder did not expect it. "Let's go." The red-haired elder quickly looked around the house and walked out of the window in disappointment. He thought that by kidnapping second Lady Xiao, Chu Li would be helpless, but he did not expect him to be a grandmaster. What a miscalculation. He could not win, so he had to resort to this method. Unfortunately, second Lady Xiao was not here. He dashed towards the two elders like the wind, picked them up with each hand, and ran. In a blink of an eye, he flew diagonally up the wall. He pushed his light body technique to its limit and wanted to escape from Chu Li's threat as soon as possible. Tisk! A cold light flashed. The flying blade pierced through the red-haired elder's chest, and the force was reduced by half. It fell powerlessly into Yang Bao's academy. Yang Baoshu was shocked, and he did not dare to move. Bang! The fist force hit the red-haired elder's back. His body stopped in the air, and he spat out a mouthful of blood. His body became weak, and like a kite with a broken string, he fell straight down from the sky. Bang! Yang Baoshu's courtyard shook, and the three of them fell into the middle of the courtyard. Yang Baoshu stood on the ladder, and his expression changed. Madame Zhou shouted from inside the house. "Who is it?" "Mother, it's me. I'm cultivating." Yang Baoshu had an idea and quickly shouted. Chu Li's white robe fluttered, and he landed in front of the three elders. The red-haired elder was stuffing a red pill into his mouth, and he glared at Chu Li fiercely. The other two elders who were stabbed in the chest fell to the ground, and they stared coldly at Chu Li. They had consumed a life-saving pill, and it was a spirit medicine, similar to the spirit blessing pill. Chu Li looked down and sighed. "You guys are unlucky." He slapped the three of them with his palm. "Chu Li, you've angered King, and you'll die a horrible death." The red-haired elder was furious, and he spat out blood as he glared at Chu Li. Chu Li smiled and waved his hand. "You don't have to worry about whether I'll die a horrible death or not. The three of us will walk together on the road to hell, and it won't be lonely. I won't be sending you off. The three of them glared at him with hatred, and they breathed their last. Yang Baoshu's body froze, and he did not move. Seeing Chu Li transform into a grandmaster and killing people while talking and laughing, his previous image of a gentle Tunton collapsed, and he was in disbelief. When he saw Chu Li looking at him, he quickly squeezed out a stiff smile. Chu Li smiled, and he carried the three corpses away. Yang Baoshu felt his heart beating faster when he smiled, and it almost jumped out of his chest. Once he left, Yang Baoshu's body went limp, and he fell to the ground with a thud. "Bastard, what are you doing now? Why aren't you sleeping in the middle of the night? What are you doing?" Madame Zhou shouted as she opened the bedroom window. Yang Baoshu quickly waved his hand. All right, I'm going to sleep." "Mother, you should sleep too." "What a bastard." Madame Zhou glared at him, closed the window, and went back to sleep. Yang Baoshu's heart was in a mess, and he wanted to go back to sleep, but he could not suppress his curiosity. He slowly climbed up the wall and looked towards Chu Li's courtyard. Chu Li had returned, and he was standing in the courtyard with his hands behind his back, quietly looking at him. Yang Baoshu was shocked. Chu Li waved his hand. "Come here." Yang Baoshu was stunned, and he quickly climbed up the wall. He had thought it through, and no matter what, Mr. Chu would not kill him. He built a ladder and went down the wall and stood in front of Chu Li. Chu Li said, "I'm leaving." Mr. Chu is leaving?" Yang Baoshu panicked. Chapter 289. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, pull some votes for Chidian's 515 Fan Day. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. P.S. The next update will be at 14:00. The Alliance leader sent a few red packets, and so did everyone else. The group is about to explode. Mr. Chu is leaving? Yang Baoshu panicked. A grandmaster was a legendary figure. The most powerful person in Qingyun town was only an innate master, and the difference between an innate master and a grandmaster was like heaven and earth, yet he was already so powerful. If he could learn from a grandmaster, he would definitely be stronger than the association leader in the future. He was going to miss out on such a master. Chu Li smiled. "My enemies are here. I have no choice but to leave." "But weren't they killed?" Yang Baoshu quickly asked. He shuddered as he thought about it. He had never killed anyone since he was young. Although he was in the association, it was just a fight, and at most, he would be heavily injured. Seeing Chu Li kill people without a change in his expression made him nervous. Chu Li said, "Do you think my enemies are the 3 of them?" "No," Yang Baoshu replied. Chu Li smiled and shook his head. "They were sent by my enemies. Sent 3 grandmasters." Yang Baoshu did not know what expression he should have, and whether he should comfort him or not. Chu Li said, "The less you know about this, the better. What do you plan to do?" "I don't know." Yang Baoshu was at a loss. He had set his ambition, but after seeing what happened today, he felt that his ambition was too far. There was not a single grandmaster in the entire Qingyun town. No matter how much he claimed to be a genius, He did not dare to say that he would definitely become a grandmaster. Chu Li said, "The agile monkey fist passed down in your family is quite amazing. If you continue to train, you will have a bright future." Yang Baoshu nodded lightly. The agile monkey fist was amazing, but it would not be able to become a grandmaster. Chu Li said, "I've been studying your agile monkey fist for the past few days, and I've learned something. The agile monkey fist actually hides a heart technique." Yang Baoshu was stunned. The heart technique of inner energy had always been a sore point for him. He did not have the money to find a master, so he could only cultivate the most basic heart technique in the association, but its power was too weak. It was likely that he would not be able to reach the innate realm in this generation. Chu Li said, "Sit down and don't move. Just practice the agile monkey fist in your head. Start from the last form and practice it all the way to the previous form. Even if it's a cycle, it's useless to start from the first style. You have to do it the other way around. Let's go back and try." "Is that even possible?" Yang Baoshu was surprised. Chu Li smiled. "Don't underestimate this agile monkey fist. Your future lies in it." He waved his hand and said, "Go." Yang Baoshu was so excited that he wanted to go back and try it out. However, just as he turned around, he stopped. "Mr. Chu, will we meet again in the future?" Chu Li said, "If you have any difficulties in the future, and if you encounter any obstacles that you can't overcome, you can look for me at the E-Public House." "The E-Public House?" Yang Baoshu's eyes widened. Chu Li smiled and nodded. "Go ahead." Yang Baoshu was so shocked that he slowly climbed up the ladder, forgetting to put the ladder on the other side. Pung! He fell to the ground after stepping on air. He patted his clothes nonchalantly, entered the room, and lay down on the Kong bed. No matter what, he did not expect Mr. Chu to be from the E-Public House, the public house that was hated and envied by the martial arts world. No wonder Mr. Chu was so rich. It was said that the people from the public house were never short of money. They had so much money that they could never finish spending it. Every one of them wore luxurious clothes and ate luxurious food. Their eyes were filled with beautiful ladies, and their wives were all beauties. No wonder he had a beauty like Madame Chu. He sighed with melancholy and disappointment. Such a beauty was standing in front of him. He did not have the right to talk to her. As he thought about it, he remembered Chu Li's fluttering white robe and the scene of him killing people while talking. He sat up immediately. He crossed his legs and started to think about the agile monkey fist. First, he practiced from the beginning to the end. He did not feel anything. Then he started from the last form to the first form. After practicing once, there was a weak force in his body. His spirit was lifted. Mr. Chu did not lie to him. The agile monkey fist really hid the heart technique of inner energy. Chu Li disappeared in a flash and appeared in Xiao Shi's courtyard. Xiao Shi and Yang Su were already hiding in the cellar. He only spent 2 days to dig the cellar. He came to Xiao Shi's bedroom, lifted the blanket, and knocked on the Kong bed. "It's me." Yang Su pushed the mat from the inside and revealed herself. When she saw it was Chu Li, she let out a sigh of relief and walked out. Xiao Shi followed and frowned at Chu Li. "Is it King or the Rin Kingdom Public House?" "King and," Chu Li said. "How did they find us?" Xiao Shi patted her clothes and said in confusion, "I don't think they exposed our whereabouts. Did you attract suspicion outside?" Chu Li waved his hand. He used the omniscient mirror every time he went out. There was no one suspicious around him. Could it be someone from the public house? Xiao Shi asked. They almost never left the house. It was impossible to be recognized. Chu Li shook his head. The only person in the public house who knew he was here was Jiang Kuai. Jiang Kuai was not a problem. No matter what, we will leave today, Chu Li said. Let's find an inn to stay for a few days and see if they can find us. He concluded that Jiang Kuai was not a problem, but he had to find a way to eliminate it. He decided to find an inn. All right, Xiao said. She turned to look at the extremely simple house. Other than a Kong bed, a table, and a stool, there was almost nothing else. It was comfortable for her. She did not feel uncomfortable, as she said. The narrow house was warm even though it was simple. The peaceful environment made her feel at peace. She was lazy and did not think about anything. Her days were relaxed, even more relaxed than when she was in the public house. Chu Li smiled. Can't bear to leave? Xiao shook her head lightly. Chu Li said, I can come back and stay occasionally. You lied to me again. Xiao shook her head. If I enter the imperial residence of King or get killed, no matter what, I can't come back. Chu Li smiled. Don't worry, no one can kill you. Once you enter the imperial residence of King, and no one can control you. Xiao glanced at him and sighed. The three of them packed their bags and left Qingyun town. He ran to Danzhou town, which was 2,000 miles away. Danzhou town was about the same size as Qingyun town, but it was more prosperous. It was located by the East Sea. There was an endless flow of people coming and going, making the place particularly lively and prosperous. Chu Li brought the two ladies to the biggest inn in Danzhou town, Sea Protection Inn. They asked for a small courtyard to stay in. Chu Li looked around as he ran. There was no trace of anyone. He should not be able to find them this time. He had learned his lesson. This time, he wore a hat and secretly changed his appearance. Even if others could see him under the hat, they would not be able to recognize him. For the past 3 days, he had been cultivating the heavenly demonic power. The heavenly demonic power had reached a bottleneck and was about to break through to the second level. Once he reached the second level, he would be able to transform once more. There should be other benefits. 3 days passed peacefully, but Chu Li felt uneasy. He felt that danger was approaching. He told Xiao to change locations. Xiao did not object, so the three of them left Danzhou town and went south along the seaside to Meng State. They stayed in Meng State for a few more days before changing locations and returning to Danzhou town. This time, Chu Li could conclude that the problem was not with Jiang Kuai, nor was it with the High Duke's public house, nor was it with him. In a small courtyard of Sea Protection Inn in Danzhou town, at noon, the three of them sat in a gazebo and chatted. The sun was shining brightly outside. It was a good day. Chu Li's face was solemn. His mood was not so bright. Second lady, do you know of any special skills that can search for traces? Chu Li took a sip of tea and stared at Xiao face. Xiao thought for a while. Special skills. From what I know, the most powerful is the all-seeing divine power from the Titanium Temple. Chapter 290. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, pull some votes for Chidian's 515 Fan Day. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. I beg for everyone's support and appreciation. Chu Li's expression changed. The Titanium Temple, the Tempest Temple, the Titanium Temple, the Amethyst Mountain, and the Green Deer Cliff were the 4 great sections. The Titanium Temple was one of them. It was obvious that they were not to be trifled with. The Tempest Temple is in the east, and the Titanium Temple is in the west. The disciples of the Tempest Temple are everywhere in the world, and they have countless devotees. The Titanium Temple, on the other hand, is in seclusion. They have very few disciples and rarely get involved in worldly affairs. Xiao said, however, the Titanium Temple is on par with the Tempest Temple. Naturally, we shouldn't underestimate them. Instead, we should be more careful. The Titanium Temple is extremely strict in recruiting disciples. Every disciple that enters the temple is a genius. Out of the Titanium Temple's 8 major supernatural powers, a disciple must cultivate at least one of them before he can leave the temple and step into the secular world. 8 great divine powers. Chuli frowned and thought about it. Could it be the heaven's eye connection or the mind connection? That's it. Xiaoshi nodded. Chuli inhaled sharply. Did they cultivate the scripture of the wisdom's root, the Buddhist scripture of Autumn Temple? Xiaoshi smiled and said, only the Temple of Autumn has the scripture of wisdom's origin. Even if you give it to them, they won't cultivate it. It's too dangerous, and they won't be able to cultivate it. Aren't you a disciple of the Temple of Autumn? You don't know about this? Chuli asked, does the Titanium Temple have the scripture of wisdom's origin? Only the Temple of Autumn has it. Has anyone from the Temple of Autumn mastered the scripture of wisdom's root? Xiaoshi asked. Chuli shook his head. Xiaoshi said, that's it. The Titanium Temple and the Tempest Temple, their divine powers have all been cultivated by their predecessors. There's experience to follow, and it's reliable and can be cultivated. The scripture of wisdom's origin. The scripture of wisdom's origin is only a legend. No one has ever cultivated the divine power. Everyone thinks it's a fake scripture. It's not suitable for training. Chuli nodded slowly. Xiaoshi continued. Moreover, in the cultivation of divine powers, confidence is extremely important. Faith is the first of the 4 mindsets of Buddhism. Otherwise, the divine ability won't work. In that case, someone has mastered the all-seeing divine power and found us. Chuli pondered and said, the all-seeing divine power will need something to assist it, right? It's impossible to see whoever you want. Using my blood as a guide. Xiaoshi said, they should have my hair. How troublesome. Chuli frowned. If that's the case, it's impossible to shake them off. Then we'll just run around randomly. Xiaoshi smiled. We're always ahead of them, and they're always following behind us. They won't be able to catch up with us in a short time. Chuli shook his head and muttered, is there any way to restrain this divine power? There was no such thing as an invincible technique in the world. Nothing was perfect and flawless. Take his omniscient mirror, for example. It was full of wonders, but if it were not for the fact that he had lived 2 lives and his soul energy was twice that of an ordinary person, he would not have been able to cultivate it. He would not appear in the world. No matter how powerful the all-seeing divine ability was, it was not omnipotent. Xiaoshi shook her head. Chuli asked, if the distance is far enough, will you be able to sense it? I don't know. Chuli sighed. Looks like I can only snatch your hair back or kill the person who cast the spell. Killing the caster was just a bad idea. After all, there was more than one disciple in the Titanium Temple. Retrieving the hair was the key. However, his solemn expression was not because of the all-seeing divine power, but because of the Titanium Temple. Was the Titanium Temple aiding King? And was there only one disciple from the Titanium Temple who was aiding King N, or was it the Titanium Temple? Was the Titanium Temple betting? Logically, the 4 major sects did not need to care about who the emperor was. No matter who it was, the 4 major sects would pass down their legacy. There were ups and downs, but the legacy would not be broken because they had a strong enough foundation. Feng, Huang Mountain, the Titanium Temple. Chuli sighed. King An's influence was not only in the imperial residence of King An, but also in the martial arts world. He could not underestimate King An. After all, he was the prince of a country. Once he gave an order, countless people would follow. Let's leave tonight, Chuli said. I want to see if the all-seeing divine ability can be found. His light body technique was extremely fast, and his inner energy was endless. He supported himself to run without stopping. His speed was shocking, and no one could compare to him. He continued to run, running from the east to the west in one breath. After crossing 10,000 miles, he arrived at the border with the Fu Dynasty horse racing town. The customs of horse racing town were different from those of the Ji Dynasty. The people dressed openly, especially the women. They were not as conservative as the Ji Dynasty. Everyone wore a tube top and a skirt over it, revealing their snow-white cleavage. When they walked, their meatballs trembled, making one's heart flutter. The women here were also more cheerful. They spoke loudly and laughed without restraint. They did not care about the beauty of being reserved. Chuli smiled. The atmosphere here was not inferior to the world he reincarnated from. It was an eye-opener. Xiao Shi and Yang Su kept frowning. The two women were dressed very conspicuously. It was obvious that they were not from horse racing town. Chuli found an inn to stay. He wanted to stay for a few days to see if they could find her. This was just a test. No matter how far they ran, they would have to return to the fairy's capital a few days before the wedding. At that time, once the all-seeing divine ability was used, Xiao Shi would have nowhere to hide. Everything would be in vain. The most fundamental way was to find her hair. But to find her hair, he could not bring the two of them. He might not even succeed alone, let alone bringing two burdens. He wanted to hide them first, then go alone. But if he could not hide, then he could not leave. The inn's courtyard was brightly lit. There was a stove in the pavilion. The three of them sat around the stove. The weather here was strange. The day was as hot as summer, and the night was as cold as winter. Chuli was not affected by the heat or cold. He was still dressed in a white robe. The two women wore cotton clothes and leaned close to the stove. I don't know if the formation can block the all-seeing divine ability. Chuli took a sip of tea and grinned. The tea had an earthy taste. It was really disgusting. His omniscient mirror sometimes could not see through some formations. For example, Tai Hua Valley's formation and Rising Sun Mountain's formation could block his omniscient mirror. The omniscient mirror could only see 5 miles away, but the all-seeing divine ability could see 1,000 miles away. The formation might not be able to block it. Xiao Shi frowned and shook her head. There were not many people who knew about formations. The monks from the Titanium Temple rarely left the temple. She had never seen them go against a formation master. Then let's try. Chuli said, I wonder who they will send to track us. Let's try. Xiao Shi said lightly, it's not a big deal. If you ask me, just kill me. Let's see what they will chase after. Chuli glared at her. Xiao Shi said, living is really boring. Chuli smiled. In the future, when you meet a man you like, you will find it interesting. He also felt that Xiao Shi was very pitiful. Since she was born, she had never had a good day. Now that her body was finally healed, she had to endure all this. Oh, Xiao Shi smiled faintly. Like you, I see that you are depressed. You don't look interesting at all. When Chuli returned from Snow Lunar Pavilion, he was like a different person. He did not have the sharp edge he used to have. He was reserved and depressed. It was as if his heart was constantly repressed and could explode at any time. It was earth-shattering. Chuli shook his head. I am different. After being tormented by my sister, you still like me? Chuli coughed lightly and lowered his head to drink his tea. Love was a magical thing. Even if he had the divine ability and could make his mind as calm as water, reflecting all things, he still could not win against love. No matter how smart he would still become stupid. There was nothing he could do. Liking was liking. There was no way to not like it. He analyzed it calmly. Maybe it was because he could not get it that he felt it was better and could not forget it. Chapter 291. P.S. Here's today's update. And at the same time, pull some votes for Chidian's 515 Fan Day. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. I beg for everyone's support and appreciation. The 3 of them toured around Horse Racing City for 3 days. In these 3 days, Chu Li set up a formation on a mountain outside of Horse Racing Town, the reversal of heaven and earth formation. This formation could confuse the heavenly oracle and cause people to lose their minds. Those who were trapped in the formation would go mad and die. His omniscient mirror could not see the situation inside the formation from the outside. 3 days later, late at night, the bright moon hung high in the sky, its silvery splendor sprinkling down. Chu Li suddenly got up and glided to the bedroom opposite and knocked on the door gently. "Who?" Yang Su's voice rang out. Chu Li said, "I'll wake the lady up. We'll leave immediately." "Chief, please wait a moment," Yang Su replied. The sound of clothes rustling could be heard. Chu Li withdrew the omniscient mirror and urged, "Quick, quick. Don't rush, hun. Have they found their way here?" Xiao Shi's slightly hoarse voice was heard. Chu Li said, "It should be soon. I have a bad feeling about this. It's better to prepare in advance." Xiao Shi lifted the curtains and came out. She had changed into a clean white robe, which was spotless and pure. Yang Su also came out. She was wearing a plain, floral gown. "Chief, what should we do?" Chu Li smiled. "We'll leave when they arrive. Just leave it to me." Seeing his smile, Yang Su felt more at ease. She wasn't afraid of death, but she was afraid that if she died, her son, Zhu Quan, would have no one to take care of him. It would be too pitiful and tragic for him to grow up alone. Xiao Shi said, "Chu Li, let Yang Su go first." Chu Li raised his eyebrows. Xiao Shi said, snappily, "I know you brought Yang Su along to avoid arousing suspicion, but look at the situation we're in now. How can you care about that? You're one person in each hand. What if we really meet an enemy? Can you split your hands to fight?" Chu Li sighed. "I'm clumsy. How can you not have anyone to serve you? I don't need to be waited on. I have my own hands and feet." Xiao Shi said, "What do you think I don't know?" When she was in the House of High Dukes, sometimes she would rather do things on her own than find maids because they were all clumsy. Just looking at it made him annoyed. Yang Su hurriedly said, "Miss, I think it's better if I follow you. It's really inconvenient to be alone." "I won't starve to death. Don't worry." Xiao Shi said, "The key is that you're a burden. How could carrying one person be as fast as carrying 2 people? Was that right? There is a shop here in the mansion. You can stay in the shop for a while. After you have settled down, you can go back." But Yang Su hesitated. Chu Li knew that Yang Su was thinking about her son. He sighed. "I'll send someone to pick you up." "Yes." Yang Su finally nodded. She curtsied gratefully at Xiao Shi. She knew that Xiao Shi had put in a lot of effort. "I'll send you off first," Chu Li said. As he spoke, he picked up Yang Su and disappeared from the house in a flash. A moment later, he appeared in a grain shop in the city. Anyone who was involved in the grain business had a powerful background, an existence that no one dared to provoke. Food was closely related to the livelihood of the people and the country. The common people, and even the ordinary rich families, could not touch it. Only those who were related to the highest level could manage it. Hence, it was very safe in the grain shop. It was also the grain shop of the e-public house. Showing the waste tag, the shopkeeper's anger dissipated, and he smiled. Chu Li settled Yang Su in a few words. Looking at the shopkeeper's temperament, he was relieved. He disappeared in front of the two of them. The shopkeeper's expression changed again. He did not dare to be negligent anymore. Chu Li appeared in front of Xiao Shi. Xiao Shi was standing on the stairs looking at the moon. Under the moonlight, Xiao Shi's face was like jade. She looked like she was carved out of white jade. She was crystal clear and flawless. Every time Chu Li saw her beauty, he had to praise the miracle of creation and lament the favoritism of God. Looking up at the moon, Xiao Shi sighed. Chu Li, do you think we can see the moon this time next year? Chu Li said, don't think too much. We can see the moon next year. The year after, 10 years, 20 years, or even 100 years later. Who can live that long? Xiao Shi smiled. Chu Li said, Lady, you ate the longevity grass. You can definitely live. I'm a grandmaster. I can live too. How can you live a peaceful life with this torturous method? You'll be thankful if you can live another 8 to 10 years. Xiao Shi said. Chu Li smiled. If I don't torment myself, wouldn't I have wasted my life? They're here. He saw two elders coming under the moonlight. One of them was dressed in a yellow frock. His bald head was shining brighter than the moon. His left palm was in an undulatory position. It was as if his arm was born that way and could not be straightened. The other elder was dressed in a linen robe. He was tall and sturdy. His face was like a silver plate, and his long white beard fluttered. Chu Li frowned. Their bodies seemed to be shrouded in a layer of faint golden light. The omniscient mirror could not penetrate it. This layer of golden light was like the sentient menace. It was a spiritual level sentient menace. Under the observation of the omniscient mirror, he could only see their outer appearance. He could not see inside. He could not see their thoughts and could not see their heart technique. Chu Li was not used to this. Chu Li focused his spirit on the old monk. He quickly found the source of the faint golden light. It was the old monk's raised wrist. There was a string of prayer beads on his wrist. This string of prayer beads emitted a faint golden light. It covered the two of them and prevented the omniscient mirror from peeping. The 36 prayer beads were oddly shaped. Each one was irregular. It looked like they were randomly picked up by the beach and strung together with pebbles. Some were even triangular or pentagonal in shape. From an outsider's point of view, this string of prayer beads looked weird. They looked like pebbles. They would look down on it and think it was a vulgar item. However, Chu Li recognized the origin of these prayer beads. They were Sarira. No wonder they had such a magical effect. This string of prayer beads, formed from 36 Sarira, contained a strong spiritual force. This strong spiritual force was useless to ordinary people. However, to someone like Chu Li, who had divine powers, it was an existence more powerful than martial arts. The old monk suddenly raised his head and looked at Chu Li's direction thoughtfully. Chu Li was stunned. He knew that it was them. He turned his head and said, "Let's go." Xiao Shi nodded. Chu Li held her wrist through her sleeves. Like a wisp of smoke, they left the inn and went outside the town. They entered the reversal of heaven and earth formation. The formation was mysterious. He could not see the situation inside the formation from outside. However, he could see outside the formation from the living door. He used the omniscient mirror to observe the two of them. He and the snow-bearded elder came outside the inn and stood quietly for a while. Then they walked towards Chu Li. They walked calmly and quickly. The two of them arrived at the foot of the mountain and looked around in confusion. "Revered sir, did he disappear here?" the snow-bearded elder asked. The old monk shook his head slowly. He looked at Chu Li's direction thoughtfully. "This is strange. Let's wait here and see. Did he use some secret technique to escape? If not, why would he suddenly disappear?" The snow-bearded elder asked. I've never encountered such a thing. The old monk's voice was calm. Even if he encountered such a thing, he was not anxious. Perhaps the lady almsgiver has passed away. Other than that, it's hard to explain. That Chuli is loyal to the e-public house. It's impossible for him to kill the second lady. The snow-bearded elder said. Let me think about it. The old monk fiddled with his prayer beads. He took out a lock of hair and stared at it thoughtfully. Chuli let out a long sigh. It seemed that the formation was useful. He needed to understand the wonders of the formation. It would help him to break through to the enlightened mastery's boundary. Xiaoshi stood in the formation on the mountainside. She heard their conversation clearly, but she did not dare to speak. Chuli said softly, Stay here for a while. I'll distract them. The old monk was close at hand. With his light body technique, he could appear in an instant and snatch the lock of hair. He would cut off the place where his divine powers could be used. Chapter 292. P.S. Here's today's update, and at the same time, poll votes for Qijian's 515 Fan Festival. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. Begging for everyone's support. Xiaoshi whispered. If they can't find it, they'll leave. Chuli said, You have to get your hair back. 2 of them, one of you, Xiaoshi said. Since Princeton sent them, you definitely can't beat them. After killing 3 grandmasters last time, Princeton still dared to send people again, and there were only 2 of them. It was obvious that these 2 were enough to take Chuli down, especially that old monk who had the all-seeing divine power. He was an extremely important person. He could not be lost. So, it could be that the old monk was powerful, or the silver-bearded elder was powerful, or more likely, both of them were powerful, and Chuli could not beat one of them. Chuli nodded lightly. He looked carefully and found a trace of strangeness and unusualness. He smiled and shook his head. Xiaoshi whispered, That old monk is a little strange. Don't go near him. Chuli smiled. All right, wait a minute. The old monk held the strand of hair and was deep in thought, as if his mind was elsewhere. It could be a trap, with the hair as bait and his absent-minded state to increase the temptation. If it was someone else, they would have already pounced on him. Old people who did not die were thieves. These old people could not be underestimated. Looking at the snow-bearded elder, he seemed to be impatiently pacing back and forth, looking closely at his expression. His eyes were also flickering, as if he was anxious and angry, very unwilling. Chuli's omniscient mirror could observe down to the smallest detail and could see through people's hearts. For many years, he was very clear about the relationship between people's hearts and their expressions. Even without the omniscient mirror, he could see that this elder was an experienced actor. His eyes were full of drama, enough to fool most people. He glanced at Xiaoshi. I didn't expect Lady Xiaoshi to have such wisdom. To be able to remain calm under such circumstances and make meticulous deductions, he was not an ordinary person. I'm bored. Reading books, pondering about things, pondering about people. Xiaoshi said lightly, How is this wisdom? Chuli said, after entering the imperial residence of Prince, and Lady Xiaoshi will need this wisdom. Let's talk when we get in. Xiaoshi said. She felt that it would be very difficult for her to enter the imperial residence of King An. Even if he went in, he would lose his life very quickly. From these 2 people, one could vaguely see Prince An's power. The House of High Dukes did not have such masters. She asked in a low voice, Who is that old man? Chuli remained silent. In his mind, he searched for more than 100 grandmasters in the Ji dynasty's martial arts world. Find someone who matches his image. His expression suddenly darkened as he muttered, It's very likely to be Guyu from Phoenix Mountain. Fenghuang Mountain? Xiao Shi scoffed. Feng Huang Mountain has also submitted to King and most likely. Chu Li sighed. The Feng Huang Mountain was a first-rate faction that was on par with the Snow Lunar Pavilion and the Green Hill, yet they were also participating in the battle for the throne. It was conceivable that the other factions would not be able to stay out of it. The Feng Huang Mountain might not be the only faction under King N's command. Xiao Shi chuckled. For the sake of a weak woman, like me, King N has mobilized too many people. This is related to the High Duke's public house. He wouldn't dare to take it lightly, Chu Li said. As they spoke, the old monk and Guyu looked at each other. He slowly walked out. Chu Li still did not move. Under the observation of the omniscient mirror, the two walked for half a mile. Suddenly, they turned back and hid in a tree. Chu Li confronted them, competing in endurance. 4 hours later, Chu Li noticed that Xiao Shi had a strange expression on her face. Her body moved slightly from time to time. He turned his head to look. Xiao Shi blushed and rolled her eyes at him. Chu Li was baffled. He looked at the omniscient mirror and suddenly felt awkward. He coughed. I'll go out and hide for a while. Wait, Xiao Shi quickly said. If you go out, you'll die. Chu Li said, I have a way to return to the inn directly and lure them away. You stay here and don't move. Whatever you want to do, you can't go more than 3 meters away. He was a little annoyed. He did not think of this at the beginning. He should have set up the formation a little bigger. He set up the formation so small for 2 reasons. First, it was to save effort. Second, time was tight. There was no time to set up a formation that was too big. Xiao Shi frowned and stared at him. Chu Li smiled and waved his hand. In a flash, he disappeared in front of her. Her eyes widened. Chu Li did not appear outside. The two of them did not move either. They must have avoided them. She let out a long sigh of relief. She could not hold it in any more. She quickly found a dense foliage and squatted down. Not long after she squatted down, a long whistle came from the direction of the horse-racing town. She could tell that it was Chu Li's whistle. She understood Chu Li's intention. He wanted to lure the tiger away from the mountain. He wanted to lure them away and bring her away. He would not confront them and escape safely. Unfortunately, Chu Li's plan did not work. The 2 cunning fellows split up. Gu Yu from the Feng Huang Mountain stayed, where she was guarding this side. The old monk floated away. Under the moonlight, his head shone. Chu Li stood on a rooftop. He watched the old monk float over slowly. He frowned and sighed. They were not easy to deal with. Almsgiver, are you almsgiver Chu Li? The old monk asked with one palm. His face was kind, and his smile was peaceful. Chu Li nodded. Very good. The old monk smiled even wider. He suddenly appeared behind him and pressed his palm on his back. Chu Li activated the omniscient mirror. He could see clearly that the old monk's figure was still in the same place. The real body was already behind him. He could see it, but he could not react in time. The old monk's movement technique was fast. It was faster than Chu Li's body's reaction speed. With a thought, the sentient menace automatically activated. Roar! A giant beast roared from the old monk's palm. Chu Li had never heard such a beast roar. His body shone with a purplish gold light to block the skinny palm. The light dissipated instantly. The skinny palm pressed on his back. He flew for 50 meters and hit the wall on the opposite street. Bang! His body was completely stuck in the wall. He struggled to leave. The skinny palm pressed down again. Roar! The giant beast roared again. Chu Li's body shone with a purplish gold light again. It collapsed under the skinny palm again. He was hid into the wall. A large hole appeared in the wall. The outline of the hole was the outline of Chu Li's body. The palm energy poured into his back. The wall in front of him was squeezed. Chu Li's face and hands were badly mutilated. His bones were faintly visible. He looked at his body with the omniscient mirror and let out a sigh of relief. The white robe on his body was unscathed. It withstood the fierce palm energy and protected his body from being scratched by the wall. He did not care about anything else. He endured the pain in his internal organs and disappeared. He appeared a mile away. Ugh! He spat out a mouthful of blood. His body went limp and he sat on the ground. He wanted to sleep. Weakness continued to devour him. It was as if he fell into the sea. The water was cold. Not only did the coldness not wake him up, it made him drowsy. It wanted to consume him along with his weakness. He resisted the sleepiness and coldness. He let the spiritual energy from all directions rush in. Almsgiver Chu. The old monk suddenly appeared. It was as if he was imminent skyline. He appeared in front of him in an instant. The shadow in front of him was still there. His real body appeared behind him. Chu Li was prepared when he appeared. He had already activated imminent skyline. Roar! A giant beast roared from the old monk's palm. It was as if there was a giant beast hidden in the skinny palm. The palm hit empty air. The old monk's smile became wider and more serene. He disappeared on the spot. Chu Li appeared in a forest in a flash. His body shot out like lightning. The spiritual energy from all directions nourished his split body. The other half drove the imminent skyline to escape the old monk's pursuit. He, Almsgiver Chu. The old monk appeared behind him again. Chu Li activated the omniscient mirror. When there was a slight fluctuation in the space, he swung his hand. Chapter 293. P.S. Here's today's update. And at the same time, poll votes for Qijin's 515 Fan Festival. Everyone has 8 votes, and the votes will be rewarded with coins. Begging for everyone's support and appreciation. The cold lightning reached the old monk's throat in an instant. Woo! The old monk raised his skinny right palm and let out a beastly roar. The exquisite flying blade floated half a foot in front of his palm, gently vibrating as if it was alive, trying to break free and rush forward. The skinny right palm pressed down lightly, and the flying blade fell to the ground. He looked down at the flying blade and shook his head. Chu Li glided away. The spiritual force from all directions surged toward him, nourishing his body. His figure suddenly disappeared in the midst of his swift movement. The old monk was not in a hurry. He waited for Chu Li to disappear for a while. When he appeared 20 miles away, he disappeared from the spot and appeared behind Chu Li. Chu Li's hands and face were badly mutilated, and his bones were ghastly. They had already solidified and stopped bleeding, but it was terrifying. A burning pain came from his hands and face. The pain was excruciating. His internal organs felt like they were being twisted by knives and burned by fire. The old monk's palm force was like lava rolling in his body, hurting his body continuously. He used the spiritual energy of the plants to nourish and repair. One destroyed, the other repaired. But the destruction was easier and faster than the repair. His body was constantly weakening, and he could fall at any time. He used all his potential, multitasking, controlling the spiritual energy of the plants, activating imminent skyline, and activating the sentient menace at the same time. The sentient menace had a unique, strengthening effect on the flesh. The energy between the muscles was circulating, repairing the damaged internal organs. He ran with all his might, no longer thinking of counterattacking. Against the old monk from the Titanium Temple, his only advantage was the life and death scripture. His inner energy would never dry up. Other than that, he had no other advantage. The old monk suppressed him in all aspects. The Eternity Blade could not hurt him, and Imminent Skyline had no advantage in front of him. Chu Li guessed that the old monk had not only cultivated the all-seeing divine power, he might have also cultivated God's limbs, or else he would not have such a strange body technique that was on par with Imminent Skyline. Imminent Skyline was a strange technique passed down from ancient times. It was another set of martial arts system. Looking at it now, it was similar to a divine power. It could break through space and was far beyond the light body technique. He had thought that no one could compare to so close, yet worlds apart. From the looks of it now, the limb of God was not inferior to him. The world was really full of wonders, and there was always a higher mountain. The Titanium Temple was indeed one of the 4 major sects in the world. The old monk appeared behind him. What the old monk saw was only his shadow. Chu Li had experience dealing with it. He activated the omniscient mirror. Once he felt a fluctuation in the space, he immediately used the Imminent Skyline. He had mastered so close, yet worlds apart, so he had a deep understanding of space. They were also the most sensitive. The old monk's white brows twitched slightly as he stopped where he was. The divine limbs consumed a lot of inner energy. Even though his inner energy was as deep as the sea, he couldn't withstand the astonishing consumption of the divine limbs. He couldn't use it more than a few times. His white eyebrows drooped, and he shook his head with a smile. It was no wonder that King and valued Chu Li so much that he sent Guyu and himself here together. He rarely left the temple and ventured into the mortal world. The few times he did, the few people he met were all top-notch experts with the god's feet. He had never needed to use the god's feet a second time, but today was an exception. At the thought of this, he executed his god's limbs again. He appeared 10 miles away behind Chu Li. What he saw was still Chu Li's shadow. He left in advance. The old monk took out a black medicine bottle and popped a pill into his mouth. In the blink of an eye, a turbulent energy flowed into his body. If it was someone else who suffered such heavy injuries, they would have died a long time ago. This Chu Li was still running happily. There was something special about him. He was difficult to deal with. Chu Li ran with all his might. He was in a sorry state. His hands and face were badly mutilated. He healed his injuries as he ran. The healing effect of spiritual energy was great, but the old monk's palm energy was even more powerful. His injuries kept worsening. He thought quickly. In the end, he couldn't care less about the burden on his meridians and activated the infinite azure sea. Layer by layer, the inner energy was compressed and became purer. The pressure on his meridians was getting stronger and stronger. He could collapse at any time and lose his martial arts. Uffed! He spat out a black arrow of blood as he ran. He didn't stop running. He was like a gust of wind passing through the treetops and mountains. The inner energy that was stacked 6 times collided with the old monk's inner energy. It shook a little and expelled a little. His meridians were damaged. The turbulent spiritual energy activated the minute pulse cleansing technique and the sentient menace. The two stacked together and quickly healed his meridians. He activated the infinite azure sea again and stacked 6 times. Then he collided with the old monk's inner energy. The cycle repeated. His meridians healed again and again. Unknowingly, they became stronger and thicker. Chapter 294. P.S. Since everyone is so supportive, I can only try my best to repay them. I'll work hard today and try for 6 chapters. Chu Li used Imminent Skyline and suddenly stopped by a small river. He bent down to wash the blood off his hands and face, showing signs of recovery. He touched his face and shook his head. With the protection of the sentient menace and the cultivation of the art of white tiger, his body was impenetrable. He never thought that one day he would be injured so badly and in such a sorry state. Through the observation of the omniscient mirror, he saw that the wound on his face was slowly healing, leaving only a slight scar. According to his estimation, he would be back to normal in another 2 days. The strength of his body was not only in his impenetrable body, but also in his recovery speed after being injured. With the help of the spiritual energy from the plants, his recovery speed was truly shocking. After he washed his face, he walked upstream and drank a few mouthfuls of water before continuing to use Imminent Skyline. Co. Sure was probably starving and thirsty and was about to faint. As he ran, he thought back to the previous fight. God's Limbs was different from his Imminent Skyline. So close, yet worlds apart, traversed through the void. Wherever his vision was, he would be able to reach it in a flash. If he could see 1 mile away, he would be able to travel 1 mile away. If he could see 2 miles away, he would be able to travel 2 miles away. If he stood on a high ground, he could teleport 10 miles away. Because of the omniscient mirror, he could observe 5 miles away. So within 5 miles, he could arrive in an instant. God's Limbs was different. He did not need to see to come over. Chu Li speculated that the old monk could follow him because he sensed him with his inner energy. Otherwise, he would not be able to locate him so accurately. God's Limbs and his Imminent Skyline were similar. The further he teleported, the more inner energy he would consume. Otherwise, he would not be able to escape and would not have the chance to set up a formation to trap him. With 2 divine powers, this old monk was truly terrifying. The all-seeing divine power and God's Limbs were used together. Who could escape from his grasp? If that was the case, he would have appeared in front of Co. Sure and himself long ago. He did not have to wait so long. It seemed like he could not use both at the same time. After some thought, Chu Li understood the reason. Both consumed a lot of inner energy and spirit. The old monk's inner energy could not support it, so he could not use both at the same time. Wah! He spat out another mouthful of blood and wiped his mouth carelessly. After a while, he had already changed his method of driving the force. After the 6th fold of the Infinite Azure Sea technique, he turned into High Duke Lu's fist force and drove it within his body. His power increased tremendously, but it was still far from the old monk's palm force. This method was even more damaging to his meridians. If his meridians had not been strengthened, he would not have dared to use High Duke Lu's fist force. In order to avoid the old monk, he had to first dissolve his internal energy. However, to dissolve such a pure and vast internal energy would take more than a few days. He did not know how many days that formation could trap the old monk. He did not know much about the Titanium Temple. However, they knew that they had a deep foundation and countless unique skills. It was not impossible for them to break the formation. Moreover, the formation was hastily set up and was not strong. But no matter what, he could still be trapped for 2 or 3 days. He had to make use of this time to set up another formation to completely trap him. Even if he could not be killed, he had to be trapped to death. When he passed by a small town, he got some water and fruits. Dried rations, braised meat, and the like were wrapped in a cloth bag and set off again. When he entered the array, Co. Sure was sitting cross-legged on the ground, motionless. Her face was pale, and her breath was weak, as if she could stop breathing at any time. Chu Li was shocked. He quickly went up to her and pressed on her back. He let out a sigh of relief. Co. Sure slowly opened her eyes that were like bottomless pools. "I thought you were going to leave me behind." Chu Li quickly passed her a water bag. "I wouldn't dare." Her red lips were already white, like a wilted flower. It was heart-wrenching to look at. Co sure took the water bag, but was not in a hurry to drink it. Her clear eyes scanned his face and saw the faint scars. She understood that for his face to be injured like this, he must have suffered a lot. Co sure took a sip of water and put it down. Was that old monk very powerful? Her self-control was strong. She ignored her body's strong desire for water and only took a sip slowly. Chu Li smiled bitterly, as expected of someone from the Titanium Temple. He has God's limbs, and his cultivation level is deep. I am far from his level. God's limbs? Co sure was shocked. Then how did you escape? God's limbs was also known as free will connection. It allowed one to cross space and appear anywhere in an instant. The boundless world became his back garden. He could go anywhere he wanted. There were not many in the Titanium Temple who could cultivate this divine power. Being targeted by the old monk with God's limbs, no one could escape. I trapped him with a formation. Chu Li sighed. I don't think he can hold on for long. You should rest here and don't eat too much. I'll go set up another formation. Are you hurt? Co sure asked. She knew. Although he said it casually, it was not as easy as he looked. Looking at the injuries on his face and his unstable breathing, his pale face, it was obvious that he was heavily injured. His injuries were not healed yet. He did not care about healing and wanted to return as soon as possible so that he would not starve and thirst. No matter how cold and indifferent her heart was, she was touched. Chu Li smiled. It's all right. Looking at her expression, he sighed helplessly. He could not say that he loved her because of his love for her. You can't hold on much longer. Heal yourself first. Co sure said. Chu Li said, set up a formation first. We have to do it before he breaks it, or else we won't be able to escape. All right, be careful. Co sure saw that he had made up his mind and knew that there was no point in trying to persuade him. She opened her bag and found a piece of dry food. She chewed it slowly without losing her elegance. Chu Li avoided Gu Yu's side and went to the other side of the mountain. The modesty sword acted as a shovel again and moved a total of 10 trees. When he moved the trees, he spat out 4 mouthfuls of blood. The old monk's palm energy was reduced by 1/10. The purity of his palm energy was even better than High Duke Lu. It was truly terrifying. Looking up at the vast power descending from the void, landing on the formation, and merging with the mountain, he was filled with a sense of accomplishment. Such a formation was powerful enough to trap the old monk for 8 to 10 days and starve him to death. The old monk sat cross-legged in the formation. He looked solemn. His right hand moved the prayer beads slower and slower. Finally, he opened his eyes and let out a long sigh. He looked helpless and lowered his head to look at the Sarira prayer beads. He was hesitant. It had been a day and a night. No matter how he planned, there was no way to escape. Sai, please forgive me, ancestral master. I can only do this. He sighed and put his palms together. He mumbled to himself and chanted a mantra. His hands formed a mudra. His aura changed along with the mantra and mudra. It became more solemn and holy. Amitabha Buddha. He chanted the name of Buddha and put the Sarira prayer beads back on his left wrist. He picked up a Sarira with his right hand and gently crushed it. The Sarira turned into a 5-colored light and shot a foot above his head. It formed a 5-colored halo. It was round and shiny. It slowly descended and stood upright behind his head. A ray of light descended from the sky and landed on the old monk. The old monk's body gradually became transparent and turned into a glazed body, emitting a gentle light. Chu Li finished setting up the formation and appeared in another formation. Xiao Qi was stretching her back. She had eaten and wanted to move around, revealing her beautiful curves. Chu smiled. You're tuning in to the Mystic Fist YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.